Alright, welcome everyone to a very special edition of the AEF Podcast. I am your host, Rob Starr, and I have two very special guests with me here today. We'll be discussing Star Wars, The Force Awakens, Star Wars, The Last Jedi, and Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, all the Disney films that have been produced in the latter form of the years that since Disney's acquire of Lucasfilms. I have my good friend Tommy Amoroso here.
Hello there.
David, you want to introduce yourself? Our good friend David Stunts is here, which I'm very happy.
Hi, I'm David Mortimore. Stunt performer, coordinator, working on it.
Well, welcome, guys. I'm really excited you guys are here. I think everyone's been really excited to hear this topic of discussion.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so I'm really excited to have you guys here. It's been a long time coming. We were really planning on doing this show even possibly as early as before the film came out for Rise of Skywalker, but then we thought maybe it'd be fun just to kind of have the film come out and then talk about it as a whole with the rest of the franchise, since we finally absorbed what we had watched. All in all, I'm glad you're all here, so I guess let's get started. Do you want to start with Rise of Skywalker first, or would you prefer to go to Episode 7, The Force Awakens?
Well, I think we should start on Rise of Skywalker first, personally, because I think that's where our opinions are most aligned from my knowledge.
Well said. That's great by me. I was not really sure where they were going to go with it after watching the events of The Last Jedi. I was really excited to go see the movie because, a lot of the teaser trailers looked really interesting and stuff like that, but I think they always tend to do that in trailers for big movies such as this. They really want to pique your interest and get you, obviously, hyped for, especially this final installment of the film, right? It was supposedly this was going to be the ever-ending conclusion to the Skywalker saga and what was to be, one of their, greater stories ever told in terms of, we can say sci-fi genre, or Lucas, I know, has stated it's not really a sci-fi genre, but I was intrigued and I was curious to see where they were going to go and take certain directions. And then when I watched it, I don't know. I didn't really. I don't know. I felt the same way. And I think I mentioned this to my good friend Tommy. I did feel the same way leaving the movie theater in 2015 when I saw The Force Awakens. I had the same kind of feeling. I had a bunch of questions that I was kind of curious that needed answers that didn't get answered in that movie. But people kept on telling me, well, wait till the next one. And you got 2 years. And I was like, okay. And, that happened.
Well, there's no waiting for the next one this time.
Exactly my point of bringing that up was the fact that there is no movie that follows up this film to answer certain questions that a lot of people had.
A lot of questions remained unanswered.
If you are, also, I should have stated this, if you have not seen the film, there is spoilers, with all due respect. Now we're almost a month and a half removed from the film, so apologize to those who still haven't seen it, and we thank you all for joining us again. But yeah, there will be spoilers. So people were questioning Palpatine's return. And again, I was already watching it in theaters, and I got to see it on the big screen because I do love, the theatrics of, the music. John Williams' music, he's one of my favorites. I call him the GOAT in terms of, cinema scores.
You know what they said about John Williams once? Apparently, I think Steven Spielberg, he asked him to compose the music for Schindler's List, and he said, like, "Oh, I don't know if, like, I'm great enough for such profound subject matter. You should get a better composer." And then Steven Spielberg responds with, "I would, but they're all dead."
Yeah, I do remember hearing this. That's a great story. It's kind of heartwarming, but also, yeah, I love John Williams. He has some of the best, scores and themes of all time. I mean, from the original Star Wars theme to Jaws, to Schindler's List. There's so many. Indiana Jones. I'm beginning to see with Jurassic Park. Like they're coming to me, but these are signature movies. Obviously, a lot of them are with Spielberg. So, and apart from Lucas as himself, so it's nice. And I was always looking forward to that. And it was good. But I was thinking when the opening crawl happens, I was taken back because they just immediately jumped to in that first little minor paragraph of the opening crawl. Boom, the dead speak. And I was like, oh okay.
Yeah, I knew Palpatine was coming back, but I was just thinking to myself, "Oh, really?
Yeah.
Right away? We're not going to build up to that? Just right now? Okay."
Yeah, I was kind of like, I don't know, I didn't have really much of a flabbergasted. I just kind of like, oh, okay. I didn't think.
I mean, I wasn't surprised, but I just found it funny.
To me, I was a little shocked. And I want to say shocked. Shock's too bold of a word, but I was a little surprised. I did not expect that they would have the Palpatine name within the first paragraph.
It was immediate. There was no reveal, no twist. It was just, here is this plot point in exposition.
I think
right
they
off the top.
probably felt like they had to do that, or else people might get too bored and leave the theater because, like at this point, everyone we love is dead. I mean, I'm not saying I like that they did that. I don't like that they did that. But I kind of can see what was going on in their minds that they would do that.
I honestly, and if we're gonna have to go, I don't want to have to fix their problems for them. They're big budget studios who produce these films, and there's millions of dollars that are invested in this. But I mean, a quick adjustment would have just been the dead speak. A mysterious call has been heard across the galaxy, and it's very, I don't know, they could describe it as an eerie voice that they don't know what it is, and that leads to the first half of the film where Kylo Ren is the one who's hunting to discover what this mysterious broadcast is, and then we see it. To put it in the opening crawl is kind of a little, unless he's alive in Last Jedi, it wouldn't make sense that to have a bad guy who we haven't seen in a while, who's supposedly dead, being told that he's alive rather than the opening crawl. It just throws away everything.
Oh, they just used that one line from Revenge of the Sith to explain pretty much everything that happened. The pathway to the dark side is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural, and that's the explanation for everything that happened.
Yeah, some way, shape, or form. I mean, there was always, at least for for what it was originally when it was the expanded universe, there was always made to believe that Palpatine had returned at one point, had come back as a clone to gather remnants of the Empire and attack again Luke and the New Republic that had formed. But then they scrapped that because obviously when Disney bought everything, they scrapped anything that wasn't canon from the original 6 films. But then they were started to say tweaking or taking little bits of things from the expanded universe. At least it seemed like they sent some researchers to go read all that huge amount of content.
I mean, I'm not frankly in love with the idea of what happened in the books with Palpatine coming back, though, because again, that's another thing that kind of contradicts what Anakin did at the end of Return of the Jedi. What, this is still going on? There are still battles against, Force users. Shouldn't that be done with?
Right. Mm-hmm. People have been indifferent to say, does this destroy Anakin's legacy? The whole Chosen One.
I'd say it makes it more moot. That's for sure.
It
does diminish it. I wouldn't say it destroys it, but it diminishes it.
I don't know.
And it also diminishes the whole idea of a prophecy. The whole idea of a prophetic chosen one that restores balance to the galaxy when after Return of the Jedi, the balance is not restored. There is still conflict. There are still entire planets that are at war with each other just because of the First Order, aka the remnants of the Empire,
well, then that
are
raises
still
the question,
scurrying about.
Though. I think if you wanted to do a sequel trilogy, 7, 8, 9, and I know that George Lucas originally did want to continue the story after Episode 6. The only way you could do a sequel trilogy is it has to have something to do with that prophecy, something to do with expanding upon the concept of what balance to the Force is. Because,
with that being said, George Lucas had stated that the sequel trilogy would be about this Children of Skywalker. And my evident understanding with the lore and getting into the balance of the Force, of the prophecy of the Chosen One, as much as, spoiler alert, but it doesn't really matter anymore because of the 789, but when Darth Vader, Anakin throws Palpatine over, into that pit there in The Return of the Jedi.
I believe it's a reactor? Yeah.
Yeah, I apologize, I'm looking for words.
Throws him into a death fall.
You're right.
Yeah.
Even if Vader didn't do that, / Anakin, and Luke had beat Palpatine somehow in hand-to-hand combat or whatnot, I would still think that it's still Anakin through his children, the Chosen One of Skywalker lineage has restored balance of the Force. So to me, the sequel trilogy that George Lucas had intended it to be the Children of Skywalker, you can still do that without having to diminish Anakin. Anakin restored balance.
No, you don't have to diminish Anakin. I'm not saying that
But I would
at
have preferred, like I said, Anakin restored balance, and his children are keeping the balance and preserving the balance. And I thought, if anything, it should have been what they had originally done, which was in the expanded universe. They had talked about Luke had gotten married, had a son, and had kids, i.e. his name was Ben Skywalker, not how they put it, where they took it and put Ben Solo, because the kids of Han and Leia, there was one who was named Anakin Solo, who also trained as a Jedi.
That's true. Why'd they name him Ben?
I don't know
who the hell Ben is.
Ben is more appropriate for Luke to name his son after Obi-Wan, because Obi-Wan is the a very important figure in his life. Mm-hmm. Or, obviously Owen wasn't, I guess, as close or as sweet in his latter years to Luke. But whatever, that's
mainly just because Obi-Wan was a part of a pivotal moment in his life, along with a pivotal moment in the galaxy.
Well, in the history of the history with his father, right? Exactly. Yeah. The way you put it, I can't. That's a very good point. So yeah, I thought if anything they were going to do a 789, I would have understood that it would have been what George Lucas had written, and then I thought that they would make films based off of that. So I can even take you far back as it was 2015. I'm about to go into the theater, and I think it was either the day of, the week of, I can't remember for the life of me. Literally right around the corner, I was going to watch The Force Awakens, and I read that these are nothing to do with Lucas. They scrapped everything, and I went, what?
I have heard conflicting reports on that matter. Like that most of what Lucas did was scrapped, but he did have the idea of a concept of Luke going into hiding for some reason.
Regardless of that, I think if anything,
they were being disrespectful to him.
Bob Iger and everyone says they were going to protect and honor his legacy, and the fact that he had these he presented them with the stories for 7, 8, 9, and Kathleen Kennedy literally word for word said we were going to take it in another direction and scrap it, along with J.J. Abrams. I was not happy at all with that. I remember seeing people on the internet getting good, it's good. I don't want anything. I don't want him to ruin what he did, to Star Wars, the prequels. And I saw that kind of stuff coming out on the internet, and I was really mad about that because they were shitting on him before he even knew what he had fully planned.
With regards to the Star Wars prequels, that's an entirely different subject.
Right, but it still goes into the same content of discussing what we were assuming.
Yes,
7, 8, 9
but I'm just about to say something right now, and I'm not necessarily going to elaborate on all the things, but anyway, just hear me out. Just because these new films are, well, to be politically correct, less than adequate, it does not make me forget about the things that were wrong with the prequels in my eyes. That being said, though, I don't attribute everything wrong with the prequels to George Lucas specifically, because if you watch the behind-the-scenes footage of Phantom Menace and whatnot, he really was surrounded by a bunch of yes men, and he was asking for opinions on what to do and stuff, but no, everybody just they were doing everything he said. And episode 3, which if you and I agree that that's our favorite film in the franchise,
I after leaving the theater of Rise of Skywalker, I deemed that.
But anyway,
Revenge of the Sith is the ultimate greatest Star Wars film.
Anyway, as I was saying, Revenge of the Sith, that was the one prequel film where he held back a little bit. He let other people take the reins a little bit in that one. He accepted a lot more suggestions and help from others during the making of that one.
Uh-huh.
That tells me that I think George Lucas, No, he's definitely not irrelevant in the slightest. He should be at the helm. You should be going to him for counsel and whatnot for these sequel trilogies, but I think he works best on a team.
Well, and keep that thought process. You were going to say?
If I may, you're entirely correct, where the lore master, the person that builds the setting, the entire story from the ground up, that lore master should be at the center of the writing for anything new, including the new trilogy, including the prequels, and anybody who was excited for the new trilogy based on how they felt that Lucas ruined Star Wars with the prequels. They don't understand that if you remove the lore master, you're going to experience an entirely different timeline, an entirely different color of the story. And like you said, they're going to take it in a different direction. Mm-hmm. Well, they did, and a lot of it didn't even align with the timeline. When you think of a timeline going 90 degrees, right? It's going at a certain angle. And then when you give a different person drawing the line, they are not going to be able to maintain the exact same trajectory of that timeline. Mm-hmm. It will go at a different angle, and stuff will not align in terms of calling back to previous story beats. Huge example of this was the we're going to get into it now. The new super weapons in not every single movie. I don't think Last Jedi had a new super weapon.
No, Last Jedi had nothing.
They had nothing.
Well, Last Jedi just had that stupid cannon that could destroy the base on the surface, and that was it. Like, what are you going to do? It was like a poor man's version of a Death Star.
Pretty much. But the thing is, they had 2 new super weapons in the trilogy that were able to destroy planets. The entire gravitas of the Death Star was that it can destroy planets. And the one huge caveat with it was that it required a lot of resources. It was a plot point in Rogue One. It was a plot point in, actually not Rebels, but in the Thrawn comics of Admiral Thrawn, where he noted there was a lot of metal and a lot of resources being allocated to a secret project that the Empire was working on, and he questioned the Emperor directly for it. All of those plot points about the resource allocation, about the strain on the galactic economy that the Death Star created, just because it is such a huge mass of electronics and metal floating through space, all of that is now moot when they already had this other planet that had a cannon attached to it that could destroy planets.
Well, I have
an answer. And that also had a fleet of Star Destroyers that can also destroy planets.
Well, yeah.
I have an answer for that question.
Yeah.
The dark side is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural.
But you still can't break writing for it.
I will not. I don't even know what to say to those. I mean, you're not wrong.
I'm afraid I can't follow that too much because I'm a little financially stupid.
Yeah. I still feel though that I would have loved a collaboration with J.J. Abrams as the director and George Lucas as creative consultant.
Definitely.
Yes. That is a duo that, well, obviously, apart from the fact that you got John Williams to do music, you have a great duo to really take this to the next level of this new era of obviously cinema technical advancements, which is why I loved Rogue One, because I got to see the 4, 5, and 6 era on the big screen in this era with the appropriate amount of CGI mixed in with what's it called, prosthetics.
I would say contemporary production value.
Yeah, it was nice to see that era, and it was a great quality story told. Didn't mess up anything with the lore, didn't fudge up anything. It was a good tie-in. Apart from that story, I J.J. Abrams has been as talked about in terms as being a protege of Steven Spielberg, who is one of the best friends on the planet of George Lucas, and why Spielberg himself never wanted to direct a Star Wars film out of respect for George Lucas, and not it was his own baby, and he didn't want to come in.
I think originally George Lucas wanted Steven Spielberg to direct the prequels.
I know he did. I did read a bunch of those, and he just he wanted to honor him that way. They had their collaboration, which was Indiana Jones, and apart from the fact of when Crystal Skull won, but
well, you know who I think would have been great to do a sequel trilogy? I mean, obviously with George Lucas as consultant, I think I would have gone with Dave Filoni personally. He's the one who's in charge of the Clone Wars and the Rebels, because I loved a lot of the things that Dave Filoni did. Now, while I do agree with you, the prequels didn't do anything that actively, took a dump on the original trilogy per se. There were several things that were alluded to in those prequel films that, like, from a story standpoint, I'm just like, oh, really? Oh, why'd you do that? Where is that coming from? And I found that Dave Filoni was really effective at explaining a lot of that, giving more depth and meaning to what was going on. I mean, like, for example, the ending of Revenge of the Sith, without a lot of the context of what Dave Filoni added and stuff that the extended lore added, that random thing at the end where, oh, by the way, Qui-Gon Jinn's back from the dead. He's gonna train you. What? He's gonna train you how to become one with the Force. I'm just like, what the heck? What?
Well,
Why?
I guess it's because, and I think you and myself, Tommy, we had this discussion about the prequels. They have to deal with the fact that they have 4, 5, and 6 coming after them, and they are going into the distant past that leads into 4, 5, and 6. So they have to play around with the fact that, remember, the justification that Battlefront 2, the original Battlefront 2, did to justify why not all the stormtroopers sound alike and there's no more clones is because there's this uprising in Camino, and the Emperor feels that a clone army consisting of Fett clones is easily too corruptible, so they make it where they're recruiting guys like you and me and anyone else to have different voices, which I find is you're even more easily able to penetrate because you can just put on a stormtrooper uniform, which is what Luke and Han did on the Death Star.
I'm not saying the Qui-Gon Jinn thing makes no sense.
Well, because there's no Force ghosts in 1, 2, and 3, if I'm correct, to make that notion.
We don't see them, but that doesn't necessarily mean we know they're there.
Well, again, we can even argue the fact that when Anakin is doing his atrocities in number 2 against the Sand People, and then even in the third one, we do hear Qui-Gon yelling his voice.
But then that raises the question, why didn't Qui-Gon Jinn disappear when he died, like the rest of the Jedi that maintain their consciousness? And Dave Filoni answers that. It's because he didn't finish his training at the time that he died, and so he's only able to function as a disembodied voice, and he can only communicate with people who knew him. Which leads back to
the issue with Rise of Skywalker, when Kylo Ren... Well, we're going to even get into it with the goddamn force healing stuff. Kylo Ren does that to Rey. He immediately disappears. She was apparently dead, and he transferred his life force into her. She did not disappear. So that means me to believe that she was not done her training. Somehow she's not done her training. When the other 2 movies, she ain't training for nothing, but we're seeing her train in this third movie, and she doesn't die that way. So that's one thing. Leia disappears. Luke disappears in this movie.
However, Leia didn't immediately disappear.
No.
On the death. She only disappeared when other parts of the story that honestly she wasn't too relevant with.
She disappeared when Kylo Ren died.
That was so creepy. It was so obvious that Carrie Fisher was not there, and they were writing all the dialogue around what little scraps they had left from The Force Awakens that they didn't use.
When I left the theater after watching the movie, that was one of my first notions or things that I noticed was it felt like they were, if you've ever seen Home Alone, they were acting around a pre-recorded dialogue. It felt very much like that. You were acting around the lines that they only had left to use of Carrie Fisher in previous footage of her. And it felt very much like that.
Carrie Fisher died at the end of 2016. They had an entire year to redo that ending.
Before Last Jedi came out. Thank you for bringing that up. Which I thought was evidently going to be shown the way that whole command bridge gets destroyed. I thought that's how they were going to finish her. And I was like, wow, this early in the movie, too, at the time. I'm like, shit, I thought, but then again, it was a year, and they always do, like they did for the film of Rise of Skywalker, they did have reshoots in April of 2019 prior to the release in December of 2019. So they did do reshoots again for The Last Jedi, like they always do for a lot of these films. I didn't realize, but there are always reshoots.
But they didn't do the right reshoots.
Right, well, that's a given. The main gripe that we've just brought up is obviously they did not take in consideration. If I was in the driver's seat and I knew what had happened to Carrie Fisher, unfortunate her situation when she passed away in late 2016, I would have then kept Luke alive and had Carrie Fisher maybe pass away.
Exactly.
Due to the fact that we don't have her.
That's what makes sense.
It was like a gift from God that the fact that they had a scene where Leia, was blasted off the ship, and you could have had her die in that moment, and that would have been a very dramatic and impactful. It was a gift from God, and they did not accept the gift.
Well, I wouldn't say a gift from God.
Well, a gift from whatever entity.
It was a gift they created.
Yeah,
exactly.
It was a gift they created, and then they just 180 on it, and they bring back a character whose actor is gone.
Well, on top of that,
sense.
If if we even have to stem into really talking about The Last Jedi, it's like Carrie Fisher. That whole scene happens. She comes back. She comes through space to the door. They bring her in, and then she is basically hospitalized for the majority of the film until they make us go on this.
So many opportunities to kill her.
Well, apart from that, there was just a point where The Last Jedi. I like The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker more than The Force Awakens. I'm going to put that right out there for everyone. If I have to do my own personal rankings just to jump right to it, I'll put Rise of Skywalker as my first of this sequel trilogy. Last Jedi is my number 2, and then...
really? You like The Rise of Skywalker better than The Last Jedi?
The reason why I'll say this to you guys and to everyone else is I like Oscar Isaac. I think he's a good quality actor. I think his performances in other films I've enjoyed, and I particularly like that we got to see more of him in Last Jedi, and we got to see him more in The Rise of Skywalker. Right. Now, with The Last Jedi, I said this to a few people, Oscar Isaac to me, Poe, in The Last Jedi feels like the audience. Very frustrated, confused at what the hell's going on, and we're watching everything unfold, but we're still being kept in the dark.
Well, I think that's a point in its favor to an extent.
Which, because he's angry with, Holdo, he feels like, what the heck are you doing? He's been obviously getting demoted, but we're like, he's trying to do his best because obviously he feels no one else is trying anything, and there's some secret underlining plan that he's being kept in the dark, and we're all kind of like, well, what's going on? But I like Oscar Isaac. I think he's a good presence on screen. I'm glad they kept him alive. But it just goes to show that she's gone, Carrie Fisher, for that part of the film of Last Jedi, and doesn't come back until, obviously, it's like, you could have done this how long ago? You could have told us this was originally the plan. But whatever, it is what it is. So that's why I enjoy it. John Boyega, obviously, I enjoy his performances. I hated Finn in The Force Awakens because I thought it was very... dumb. The character is we are led to believe he's been taken since birth or taken at a very young age from his family. Doesn't know his family. Doesn't have a name. That's why he was called FN, his number. And then they decided to Poe was like, I'm not calling you. I'm going to call you Finn. And he goes, oh, okay, cool. If you've watched movies like Edward Scissorhands, Johnny Depp has stated, and I've said this to a few friends of mine, Johnny Depp has stated that when he did Edward Scissorhands, he studied Pinocchio, he studied Frankenstein because, it's about, he was being put together and like that whole kind of, and if I was John Boyega, and again, this is obviously a professional actor who's on a very big, high-budget movie set. I mean, who am I to give him instructions? Again, it's creative decision. I would have studied a movie that I thought was great to study for a role of his character would have been the movie with Kurt Russell called Soldier. It came out in the mid-'90s. It's about the U.S. government taking children at a young age and putting them through this military program at a very young age. They're teaching them how to watch Rottweilers maul other animals. If you're on a run, they're doing like a couple mile run, and you fall behind, they will execute you. Like, it's that hardcore. So years in the future, how many missions they've been on, they have no emotion. When Kurt Russell's character gets separated from his unit and lands on this planet, he's with these civilians. He can't interact with the children because he's never been around playing like that kind of stuff or anything. He has no emotion. If I had thought about Finn's character after being a stormtrooper all this time, apart from the desertion angle, that's fine. But the fact that he was immediately quick impulses of comedic timing in that sense that he just knew, as opposed to the way it's funny when you watch Dave Bautista as Drax, where he has that comedic timing, but he doesn't know what he's saying out of his mouth.
But now there's a way to explain that, you see?
Don't you dare say it.
No, I'm not going to say that again, but we know Poe is... not
Finn?
Finn. We know Finn is Force sensitive now because of what J.J. Abrams said. That means he must have used the Force to gain social skills.
Right. I am very nitpicky with this series. I'm not going to question it. I am very nitpicky with this series, but I am even willing to justify that the Force helped him desert. Now, it doesn't change you completely in character. When you've been training, you've been told when to get up, when to sleep.
I just made a joke, so...
When you are the archetype of a character where you do not have any organic personality from an upbringing of any sort. You are completely conditioned and trained from the beginning, having, again, no organic personality.
He was already asking Rey if she had a boyfriend, blah, 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 and it was just very quick like that.
Those thoughts shouldn't be in his head.
And it was, to me, I don't know, if you're a deserter, it's like the same way, I don't know, I haven't really watched Rebels, so forgive me, but clones who defected from the Clone Wars too, they wouldn't, unless interacting with themselves, obviously they have that interaction to be quick timing, and then to us, it's the audience, we find it funny.
I'm just thinking of another character now that I think would have been great to model Finn off of. I don't know if either of you ever saw The Accountant. I don't remember who was in that film.
I'm gonna bug out. I feel like I know who's in it, but
It's a really tall fellow, and I know John Lithgow is also in it. He plays the villain. Anyway, well, The Accountant, he's a person who's very far on the autistic spectrum. He has Asperger's, and but he's really good at what he does. I mean, he's just really perfect with the shooting and stuff. And well, there's this girl that he likes in the film, and she clearly likes him too, but nothing ever happens because he just doesn't know how to interact in that manner. He doesn't know how to get things going any further. And yes, that should have been like a similar dynamic with him and Rey. That you could have had something like that.
Yeah, I honestly, I think it would have made that friendship a little bit more wholesome, that she's been on a planet by herself, being raised obviously by the guy there who she always has to keep on going and getting, scraps for to get food and whatnot. But, they're both kind of now, he's looking to get on the outside, she's an outsider, and they kind of find each other. I don't know. I thought the character of Finn was a little bit out of the... it was just weird at one point for that character.
That wasn't John Boyega's fault, though.
I'm not, listen, that's why I stated that before going into that one specific discussion. I'm not trying to criticize. I think he's a phenomenal actor. I've seen him in a few other movies.
Expanding off that point, the one thing I think was better about this trilogy than either of the other trilogies consistently were, I would say, the performances and the acting. They were all top notch all the time. They were on point. I genuinely felt that they were feeling their emotions. They weren't.
But this is where again people are also split upon. Because Rise of Skywalker, people criticize it for being rushed because they had to make adjustments to what had happened in The Last Jedi. That the main characters were all separated from each other. Finn goes with Rose to find this, code breaker. Poe is dealing with all the stuff on the main ship with the evacuation process, and we have Rey who's dealing with a grumpy Luke Skywalker. And that's about, at the time, was the longest Star Wars film, and then Rise of Skywalker comes out and it beats Last Jedi by one whole minute.
I do want to say, about Mark Hamill, I do think he is an incredibly underrated actor, and I wish he had a better career than he did, personally, because I believed everything he did in The Last Jedi. I mean, if you look in his eyes...
It's not an issue. That the fact is, the acting... I'm not going to watch a Star Wars movie for astonishing acting. but I obviously want quality, performances. That's not an issue here. I think throughout all the movies they're great. I'm looking obviously for quality storytelling that connects everyone. It makes sense for the genre of films that we're watching and those films that are connected throughout these 9 of the Skywalker series.
That makes sense. Yes.
I have
Again,
to say,
I'm just going to say one quick point. The fact that it was so rushed that even when these genuinely great performances are done by these actors, they're unfortunately passed by the audience, mainly because it's so sprung upon us because of how fast everything is happening. I know we're a generation that we watch the TikToks, the Vines, everything 6-second snaps, and it's very, very fast, but it's still, there's those moments in time where we stop and we watch and we absorb the information and we learn what these characters are going through. And at certain points, it was just boom, 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 boom. We're rolling here with Rey's training, and then she's got to go, and they have to find the Wayfinder, which Kylo Ren's also finding, but they also know that Palpatine has set out the distress. There's just a lot of stuff going on, and you were going to say, David?
I exactly agree. Where it's if you're doing a Vine or a TikTok, that's like 7-10 seconds where the story begins and ends in the 7 or 10 seconds. It's a very short time frame. If you're going at that kind of story beat pacing, but in a long form beyond 2 hours, it doesn't work. You can't remember all of the information as it's coming at you because they keep on developing the story plot. Beyond that, I forgot what I was going to say before. But yes, so...
You're talking about performances in the roles.
Yes. So in terms of the actors' performances, I think they all did a great job with what they were given. I think they cast professional actors that were able to just build... it's not even so much build a character, it was more just fit the role that they needed. There's a difference between fitting a role and then building a character within the role that you're given.
I do think that the directors, though, I'm not giving them direct credit for the stories that they decided to tell in the end, but, aren't all 3 of us actors? I think all 3 of us are actors, right? Mm-hmm. That takes a good director to bring that amount of depth into a performance, especially with such nonsense content. Because honestly, I know you guys are gonna think I'm really stupid for this, but in that scene where I know it's really stupid what happened, where Kylo comes to give his life force to make Rey live again. I know the implications of it are stupid, but I genuinely did get a little choked up at that performance, just thinking, I could see the mental process that Kylo Ren was going when he was, making this decision, and then he makes the decision, and then he looks at Rey. He knows that this is going to be the last thing he looks at before he passes on, and they have that passionate kiss, and I bought that. I bought that more than any, most of the interactions that were had between Padme and Anakin.
All right, stop that right now.
No.
That's a barbaric thing to say.
No, I'll say what you're describing.
Plot-wise, I believe their relationship more than Kylo and Rey, but just performance-wise, it got me.
Yeah, exactly, and that's a total credit to the actors.
Yes.
Because the storyline itself, the actual romantic story between Kylo and Rey, doesn't make much sense.
No, it doesn't.
It's not it's not a well-written storyline. However, the actors did such a great job with what they were given that you can still buy the emotional content within the scenes that you see. Whenever they speak to each other within that Force connection, it's still a very high-tension scene, an intimate tension. And it's purely on the credit of the actors to do that. It wasn't the director telling them how to portray this connection.
Well,
they
don't tell you everything. They don't give you everything, but
the director setting the scene. And then from setting the scene, those actors did a great job with the lines they were given, and then just with their micro-expressions where they were invested in it. And because of that, the audience got invested just in the emotional content.
But you don't just take one take. You don't think the directors had any say or gave them any advice on how to...
did. Yeah, they absolutely did, and they had to, I'm sure, like every director and like every scene with every take, they play different angles on the takes.
Because
and then
Natalie
they find the best
Portman
angle.
is a fine actress, but she didn't do too great in those prequels. Like,
Yeah, I agree.
But I mean, it's debatable what it is because again, era and people's interaction are different. Like people right now aren't talking the way they were talking 20 years ago.
Right.
The way
I'm not even thinking about the way they were talking. I just, like, I don't know, I pick up on... You just pick up on subtle little emotions and things like that. I mean, like Alec Guinness, for example, I mean, he had a lot of strange dialogue in the original trilogy, but I bought everything he was saying. I mean, like that line he says, "That's no moon, that's a space station." Like, the look in his eyes and the way, like, he says, "I just felt a million voices cry out in terror and then be silenced." No, not just any actor could add that much emotional depth to such simplistic dialogue, to be frank.
Mm-hmm.
And that dialogue was similar to the way it was in the prequels. And there was also...
But when you're comparing...
McDermott.
If you're going to compare prequel stuff between Padme and Anakin, the difference in you're going to compare it to Kylo Ren and Rey's interaction at the end. Kylo Ren brought her back to life. He is relieved that he saved her. When you're looking at Anakin, he is conflicted because he's hiding a secret that he's in love with her. First in Attack of the Clones, he's dealing with it. And I already discussed, when Tommy and me have discussed this, you're like a fanboy.
I'm a fanboy.
No, not you.
Oh, okay.
I mean, like, put everyone can put themselves. You're a fangirl. You're a fanboy.
I think I'm far from a fanboy of Star Wars.
Whatever. I'm a fanboy. Long story short is when you have your crush that you've been thinking about for the longest time with you, and you're actually been told to be her bodyguard, like it was for Anakin. You're obviously a teenager. Teenagers, like we've all been, can be bitches. Little bitches sometimes. Can be whiny, can be indecisive, but can also be, like, not to use the cliches of Star Wars, but conflicted. And he's got that going on. And he finally reveals his feelings for her. She says she finally has some feelings. He doesn't know what to do because it's everything that what he is as a Jedi. Then we fast forward 3 years later, after years of war. He's been in and out of seeing her interactions, everything that's going on with the Clone Wars, and that's when he finally comes back and he just can't wait to see her, and she's talking about that there was rumors that he was dead. He's going through all these conflicts. Again, it's a secret marriage that they've kept in hiding for 3 years. On top of that, he's finding out he's...
I won't deny that scene where she talks about that...
There is no happy ending for Anakin and Padme.
No, there is no happy ending.
Kylo Ren and Rey got a happy ending in that moment in time.
They did have... I don't know, that didn't look like a happy... He's dead now.
Listen, in that moment in time, the Emperor is defeated, Rey has been saved. In that split second of camera time, we've got them smiling at each other, and that's why they kiss and they embrace. I can't put comparison in that type of stuff and justify that one scene that's better than stuff in the prequels of interaction.
I never said that scene was better.
No,
I just said...
You said believable, though. And if
the performances from those particular actors...
But I'm not here to even compare performances. I'm here to compare active storytelling.
Storytelling? Yes, the story between Padme and Anakin made sense, but, I mean...
Kylo Ren and Rey, and we want to say Reylos, at some points does not make sense.
True.
People complain this guy's torturing her in the first movie, then he's obsessive with her in the second movie.
But let me ask you one question. Imagine if the quality of acting in The Godfather was the same as that of which we saw in the prequels.
I can't compare it.
I know, but imagine if it was. I think that if people would have a largely similar reaction, frankly, to, I mean, how they're reacting to the prequels right now, about 10 years after they're made. They're starting to realize, these weren't that bad.
I don't think we're going to get that with these movies. I can say they'll be appreciated, but they're easily forgettable.
I'm not talking about the sequel trilogy now. I'm talking about The Godfather in comparison to something like Star Wars Episode 3.
But Star Wars Episode 3 and that group of those 3 films, they at first were hated. But they didn't split the fandom the way these movies have, compared to 7, 8, 9. And I guarantee you they are still celebrating those prequel films, and people who originally disliked them are coming to appreciate them now and actually disagree with themselves who are originally hating on them, because they can see now what has happened in 7, 8, 9. 7, 8, 9... with all due respects, we can agree probably should not have happened the way it happened. I think they should have left it at 6, and they should have done movies like Rogue One. Even if they wanted to do Solo, that's fine. And stuff surrounding maybe that era, not directly affecting that era. And then on top of that, if they wanted to do stuff in the future, stuff in the past, there is a whole variety. You literally have a galaxy far, far away and a universe with endless amounts of content that you could create without altering things that made this story have so many fans across the planet in generations. That is where we come to now in this setting after watching these movies. The performances are easily justifiable in certain cases. I don't think anyone had a performance that took me out.
But I think that if, like I said, if The Godfather had that quality of acting, it'd be the same situation. About 10 years or so after the films were made, people might start analyzing it. Oh, okay, this is some good storytelling here. Oh, this kind of made sense. But if the acting, if you didn't get all those subtle little things from Al Pacino or all those greats, that movie would not have been half as well received as it was in the end, and that's why people did not like the prequels.
Yeah, but I think also when you're looking at the
show it to any random person, they're gonna go like.
But you're also looking at a cinema as a whole. Like, you're comparing The Godfather, which is not science fiction. It's about these characters telling a story of a magnitude of family and what, which is also the same way in certain cases of Star Wars.
Exactly.
But it's different camera, it's different cinematography, it's different era of filmmaking in general. You can't compare something like that to
Godfather
is
timeless by many people's accounts.
Yeah, but
the way that cinema.
Absolutely, but also it's Godfather is set in something that's a little bit more closer to life, where Star Wars is so fantasy. It is so I can't say really unrelatable, but yeah, it's unrelatable. You can't relate to people flying to different planets to either engage in conflict or to engage in politics.
No, you can't.
There's because it's such a disconnect from reality in the setting of Star Wars. You have to forgive a little bit of that performance. I say performance disconnect, but at the same time, the language that they'd be speaking.
I am able to forgive it.
Even if they are speaking English, the way of them speaking English should be totally different from what you would experience in The Godfather or somewhere that's set in New York City. Just because it's a galaxy a long time ago, far, far away. The way of speaking would be different. Our way of speaking in 1900 is different from what it is now.
That's what I'm trying to say with the eras, especially Star Wars eras.
It's such a difference in language.
I respect it or appreciate certain types of things that the Empire was based off of, i.e. the Roman Empire / Roman Republic and Nazi Germany. No pun intended, there was also a chancellor. Like, there was, Hitler was the chancellor of Germany when he came into power. So was Palpatine. Then he made himself emperor, which is what Hitler did. He declared the Third Reich be around for 1,000 years. Palpatine did that for 10,000 years for the Galactic Empire. Even the formations were identical, from Roman Republic to Roman Empire, similar to the way it goes Galactic Republic to Galactic Empire.
A lot of parallels.
I told this to Tommy, and I think he's going to know where I'm going with this when I had this discussion. I don't know how many people know, because I love history. I used to study history for fun, but it's fascinating to me. There is an era from the 5th century to the 15th century AD, which was after the fall of the Roman Empire. Does anyone know what that is? I think I asked Tommy this, and he finally...
It's the Middle Ages.
Right. Middle Ages, Medieval Ages, / Dark Ages.
Why? Well, by the time you asked me this question, I was really tired.
That's fine. It's not.
And high.
It's not to put you in place. I'm just saying it's because I'd rather not sound like a broken record to telling him that specific story.
Exactly.
But for everyone else who may not hear this, it's called the Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, the Medieval period. Why is it called that? From the 5th century AD to the 15th century AD, basically until the Renaissance, after the fall of the Western Roman Empire. It went into the feudal system, but after great migration periods of Germanic tribes and whatnot, filling in France, Spain, the parts of England, Italy itself, North Africa, a lot of what made classical antiquity unique and obviously fascinating dissolved. Reading and writing became very, not many people knew how to read and write anymore. Architecture fell flat, apart from Gothic-made structures. a lot of that stuff fell very faulty, and that's why it was called the Dark Ages, because of that kind of stuff. And it wasn't until basically the Age of Discovery that the Renaissance came in with Michelangelo, science, art, all that kind of stuff came back. And again, it only was preserved because of the Byzantine Empire that survived, the Eastern Roman Empire, which was in Greece, Turkey, all of where it is now Israel and northern Egypt there. And that's why I thought when the Empire became the Galactic Empire, it was now the Dark Ages. And it's funny because when there was the Roman Empire, was the height of that type of era of, literature, art, and all those kind of things. But when the Galactic Empire takes over in the Star Wars universe, the Force is now at a very little intelligence. There's no midichlorians because that was the science aspect behind the Force. At the height of the Jedi's power, they knew what was the Force, which was midichlorians, and everything else was belief. So when Obi-Wan, Yoda, and everyone else who does survive the Great Jedi Purge goes into hiding, they have to go back to basics. It's the same way that now I can go to a convenience store, buy a lighter, and use it to light in the Force, but if I lost all that ability, I have to go back to basics, find rocks and sticks, and figure out how to make
Which is
fire,
actually
right?
what I imagined that, if we want to get into the sequel trilogy again, I imagined that's, if you wanted to make a sequel that made sense. I thought that's what Luke was doing.
That's fine.
They didn't get Balance of the Force right beforehand.
But that's what I was trying to get people to understand about the prequel era that had issues with the midichlorians and that kind of stuff like that, was to say this was a height power, this is when knowledge was at an extreme of the Force. Now you're watching 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9, where it's more of you're going back to basics and you're really trying to discover what the Force is. Again, you're trying to not reinvent it, you're just trying to feel for what it really originally was. And that's the specialty part of it. And that's how you're supposed to show that the big tragedy that happens and Revenge of the Sith and how the Great Jedi Purge and the hunt for all this and destroying of all that is supposed to be a very large tragedy. The other issue going forward with the fact that I like the prequels, I like 4, 5, and 6 compared to 7, 8, 9. The bad guys at one point in each of these 3 trilogies win.
Oh, yes.
Kylo, I was going to put a status, but I didn't want to get into any social media arguments with anyone. I was going to put, I can't wait to watch Rise of Skywalker and the super powerful First Order and Kylo Ren get their asses kicked for a 3rd straight movie, because that's all they did. They had all this firepower in 3 straight movies. They didn't use any of it. They had these dreadnoughts. They had these huge super duper blooper Star Destroyers. They have a planet that instead of killing 1 planet at a time, they can kill 5, because they got to go above and beyond to put 1 up on everything else that came before.
I also get irritated with the people who say, "Oh, well, you don't need to know anything about Snoke. You didn't know anything about the Emperor."
Before we even get into that, because sure. the Emperor's talked about in Episode 4 that he's dissolving the Senate, which was a good callback to, and which is hilarious because it's in 1977, and then when 99, 2002, 2005 happened, and there's a Senate, so it's great. That's a great thing. Mm-hmm. That was always in a line from 77 on, which I appreciate. But again, I've said this again, and because I'm a fanboy and I'm so passionate about these movies, it sucks because you love these movies growing up, and you were like, I don't know how many other people feel this way, being bullied as a kid for liking Star Wars or being called a loser because you like Star Wars, this, and this. And I view myself as a person who appreciates all different arts, all different, passions, whether it be sports or any type of, other great things that people find passion in. Watching Star Wars in certain elements, when you watch Episode 4, it's through this lucky moment that they destroy the Death Star. That's why it feels a very pinnacle moment, because we also lose Obi-Wan, so they were trying to copy that in Force Awakens. When you get to The Empire Strikes Back, it's like that, jab right hook type of style, but the Emperor comes back with full firepower, and the whole point is Episode 5, Empire Strikes Back, is the Battle of Hoth. Return of the Jedi, after the Empire kicked the shit out of the good guys in the previous movie, is about Anakin Skywalker coming back, and that's that hints. Now, I'll go into the Phantom Menace. Who's the Phantom Menace? It's Palpatine. We're getting an idea that Darth Sidious in the shadows. The Attack of the Clones, the Battle of Geonosis. And that's the start of the Clone War. That leads into Episode 3, the Revenge of the Sith, is Order 66, the Great Jedi Purge.
Are we getting into a prequel discussion now?
No, we're not. We're getting into a full tie-in.
Okay.
Episode 7, The Force Awakens, is Rey.
Just Rey.
Episode 8, The Last Jedi, is Rey. Now, no spoiler alert, but I'm going to have to do it. Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker. At the end, she takes the name Rey Skywalker. 3 movies for her. Fair enough.
Yeah.
You want to do that? Cool. But again, she kicked the shit out of everyone. I didn't really see her go through much. She's a great actress, Daisy Ridley. So I can't wait to see her what she does in her next.
Oh yeah, but projects. You know, and when she says like, "Oh, everybody keeps telling me they know me, but nobody knows me." I can't argue with her there. I mean, that's all I was thinking during the Rise of Skywalker.
Well, don't give me that cringe story, and this is not you, I just mean in general, people who chirp the prequels about the whole I hate sand line, because for the love of God.
I wasn't about to say that.
That's why I was
just saying, like, I can't argue with you, Ray. I don't know you. I don't know any of you people, so why should I care about what's happening to you people? Everybody I care about is dead already, so... What's the point?
Right, that's why it felt at certain points in Rise of Skywalker like it was rushed. Everyone had to finally meet, together and get things going without, much going on.
Well, I do think that, has a lot to do with what occurred in The Last Jedi, the fact that they did not use their time wisely in that film.
And my initial plugs with this even goes further than Last Jedi. Sure, some people will say there's optimism, and I mean, maybe I'm quoting you, Tommy, on this, for optimism that what they set up in The Force Awakens is something that, they could have worked off of, but I was already seeing through the cracks, because they, like many other sometimes movies, this isn't the first time in cinema history or movie production history where they do a trailer and they deceive audiences. I didn't think we'd be without the entire film of Force Awakens without Luke Skywalker until the 30 seconds, so that was another thing.
I honestly predicted that.
I thought it was a kick in the nuts, and I thought it was a little bit too much of a tease. And then even Mark Hamill, who I thought, which was hilarious, because he was more vocal during the whole process of The Force Awakens compared to The Last Jedi.
I'm pretty sure that's because they shut him up.
I know that's definitely the case, but something that even people were more vocal about, he took a back seat on, because he thought, for what was happening in The Force Awakens, that things weren't necessarily the way he thought they were going to be. He even brought it up that, they'd asked me to go to the gym multiple times during the week, and then they only used me for this one scene. And I was kind of like, yeah, I don't really think it made sense. I mean, if you wanted to do some stuff and have him come in, or I don't know, or maybe take half of what you did in Last Jedi of the confliction on the island and put it in Force Awakens, so when he does return and he sees Han get killed, that's more of a significant moment. And I know it's for, Rey and the other group to witness this so they can go through, but I would have preferred that, because then he would have run away and go, oh my God, I trained my nephew who turned to the dark side, then killed his father, and I watched that take place before my eyes. I can't be a Jedi anymore, and the Jedi need to stop. That's more of a compelling story arc than your Jedi Academy got destroyed, you went to go cut yourself off from the Force, and we never saw that except for minor cuts in The Last Jedi and Force Awakens.
Which I would also add, the destruction of his own Jedi Academy would be something that's way more interesting to tell, as opposed to how we start off in Force Awakens.
I was just about to get into that. See, the thing about the sequel trilogy, everything that happened, the implications of what happened to lead up to all of the things that happened within the sequel trilogy are far more interesting than anything we actually saw happen in the original trilogy. I think that's why, I found myself, I got hours and hours of, mental gymnastics from trying to figure out what the hell was going on in The Force Awakens after that film came out. And a lot of people did. You saw so many fan theories about how this happened, about what was going to happen next, and a lot of those fan theories were well constructed. I'm going to give people credit for that. I'm not giving the creators credit, but still, I got a lot of hours of, mental working from that, and so I think that's why a lot of us were very disappointed with what happened with The Last Jedi.
And thinking about 1 through 6, the only movies that lead you with, I don't want to say unanswered questions, but kind of like, whoa, what's going to happen next, is after Episode 4 and after Episode 1. Because after Episode 2, you're getting the sense of what's to come next. They already state the Clone War has started. They're assembling the troops. They're assembling the armies of the Republic. It's getting started, so that when you come into the beginning of Episode 3, boom, the Clone War's at its pinnacle moments and its final climaxes. That's that series, or that part of the trilogy for the prequels. Going to 5 and 6. Han Solo has been taken in carbonate. You're just kind of left like, oh my God, they took him. What's going to happen next? But you're kind of like, you kind of have a steady where it's going to go. They have to get Han at least back for the next movie, right? in this movie series of 7, 8, 9, it was after every single movie you were left to kind of the same way you felt after watching episode 1 and episode 4. After all these movies, including the conclusion film of episode 9. In certain cases, I know we kind of got it when the Emperor's defeated.
And also, like, I mean, I know everybody under the sun has asked this, but who had sex with Palpatine? Why didn't Palpatine decide to keep track of his kid? Like, I want to see, like, this relationship between Palpatine and the one woman that potentially stole his heart, or whose heart was stolen by Palpatine. Well, that sounds like a really interesting story right there.
Yeah, that's...
It's just a story they allude to and then they move on from.
Yeah, no, that story only exists as a justification for...
Rey Palpatine.
Exactly.
Which,
it is such a plopped-in justification.
We were looking it up, actually, too, David, and I wanted to bring this up to you, that we had noticed that they kept the distance in age from actually Kylo Ren and Rey is the same as Daisy Ridley and Adam Driver.
Interesting.
So I actually just looked this up.
They're 9 years apart.
Rey is 19 in Force Awakens, and Kylo is 29.
Right.
Okay.
So that's 10 years.
If she's about 20 years herself at the time, and the events of Force Awakens take place 30 years after the events of, I believe, Return of the Jedi, the timeline, unless, again, when we go to that flashback in Episode 9, Palpatine is already dead by that point then, if they're killing her parents.
Well, no, but he's not dead, because you see, Roberto, the dark side is a
Yes, well, I mean, whoever sent that...
But what you're describing is like, they jumped 30 years ahead in the timeline from Force Awakens to Return of the Jedi, correct?
Yeah, that's the separation is 30 years.
So Palpatine somehow post-mortem has this kid? I see what you're saying.
Well, I don't know.
Makes no sense.
I don't know. I don't know his own.
God.
I don't know his own. Yeah, because it's led to. Like, we were also, and this is another problem. In the movie, it doesn't tell you who she's related to, her father or her mother to him. But then it's you have to look up on your own, which you do a bunch for all these movies. You have to look up on your own time on the internet, find out her father is the son of Palpatine.
He's like 100 years old, and he's come back from the dead. How does this still work down there? Well, that's a miracle,
again,
right there.
If this is about, if Rey's 9 years old, by the time, she's a girl when her parents leave her or whatever it is, that's already about, 20 years after the events of Return of the Jedi?
Already 20 years after.
So her parents, who would have been, the son, who's the son of Palpatine, is there. I don't know, that's 20 years later after his father's dead in the destruction of the second Death Star. That's where I'm just kind of a little bit confused.
So what you're describing is in Return of the Jedi, there would be a child of Palpatine already alive somewhere.
But that child of Palpatine's age would be either because the portrayal of the parents don't look very old in the flashback.
No, they look
Actually, speaking of which, that's another thing.
Which
Palpatine
means they would have been
10.
Which
Who he
means
killed.
Palpatine's son would have been 10 if I'm looking at the way I'm trying to calculate.
On Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, he would have been 10 around that time,
Yeah.
and then when Rey's born, he's about in his 30s.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing I can think of right now. And if she's 9 when he's in that flashback, he was having her. The Palpatine's son is having kids when he's in his 20s or early 20s or something like. I don't know. I'm not really here to do a whole biological gene pool transfer or connection, but
you're not trying to suss out the family tree for Palpatine here.
Well,
just in that
again,
little
I
tiny
feel
connection.
like a lot of fans have to do their own self-explaining for stories or questions that haven't been answered in these 3 films.
And that is an indication of a weak story. You shouldn't have to be thinking in your own mind to justify the story beats you're seeing. You should see that justification play out later in the story.
I know, I was just really, really, really hoping they would explain all that in The Last Jedi, and that we would, get some sort of trippy, complicated
one thing
plot.
that I still have...
Reminiscent of Metal Gear Solid 2. I don't know if any... Metal Gear... That's what I thought.
Absolutely love it.
I thought they were going to do something like Metal Gear Solid 2 in The Last Jedi, where, all of this was similar to what happened, with Luke all those years ago. But that was a reason.
Yeah, it was fabricated to be like that.
Yes.
Which was a great story point. But that's not the case in this trilogy.
I know.
Well, I always had the biggest smile on my face after this movie came out was everyone who told me I was a crazy guy for being angry that that lightsaber was in Maz's care for that whole time, and we never got an answer for it, and I thought it was a cheap plug in The Force Awakens back in 2015 when I first saw it, that she goes, that's a story for another time. And I'm like, you're going to make me wait another 2 years to explain this one?
There's another character that was
never
completely wasted.
Never, because she was dealing with a union dispute in that little hologram that we see her in episode 8. And then she's on camera a little bit some more for Rise of Skywalker, and it's still never explained.
And I think one of the main problems with Rose was the fact that she didn't need to exist. You already had a bunch of good characters that we could have spent more time with getting to know more.
What's the actress's name again?
Kelly Marie Tran.
Okay, Kelly Marie Tran. And again, no one should be having to deal with what a lot of these actors may have been dealing with over social media attacks and stuff like that.
I know. That's not right.
Anyone who is attacking them for other than themselves, they're losers.
It's the same of the little children who get afraid of the actress that played Anne Petunia in Harry Potter. Mm-hmm. That's what it looks like to me.
Right. Well, I mean, it's not... I'd had no issue with the actress, as other people who argued against her probably didn't. Most people hated her character.
Yes.
Yeah, the character
was completely unnecessary.
Unfortunately, some people don't know how to do it in an appropriate way to justify what they're trying to say.
And they launched those insults directly at the actor.
Same thing what happened with the actor who played Jar Jar Binks.
Was written, not even how they portrayed the character, how it was written.
Yeah, exactly. 100% David, I can't agree more with that. It's the same way that happened with the actor who played Jar Jar Binks. I'm pretty sure Jake Lloyd got it after The Phantom Menace. A lot of these people are angry. I always say Rose's character, and it's funny because Mickey Mouse is running the show, Rose's character felt like, if anyone knows the shows, That's So Raven, Hannah Montana, Wizards of Waverly Place.
I like That's So Raven. I used to watch it.
Sweet Life of Zack and Cody. She felt like a Disney Channel character that was airdropped in the Star Wars universe. The way things were coming off of in The Last Jedi.
Right. Yeah.
Then they censored the heck out of her, it seems, or they did what they did to Jar Jar Binks in Attack of the Clones. They did to Rose in The Rise of Skywalker.
Just minimized her.
Really, really.
Yeah. They didn't kill her, but they minimized her.
Yeah.
Why don't we talk about Luke's death for a minute, unless there was something else you wanted to talk about.
Well, no, I'm
just thinking about it.
I honestly just wanted to bring it back because it came in my popped in my head earlier when we were talking about actors' performances, and I think her portrayal was fine for what it was, but it also felt like a Disney Channel character that should have been on one of those sitcom shows that was dropped in this situation. They did give her a good character arc to start Last Jedi because her sister was on one of the bombers. So again, it wasn't really her character background wasn't stupid at all. It only became dumb towards when they were going through that planet and they had to go free the animals there, do that whole thing as a sub story. Now again, it justified that they could get out of there to escape the clutches of the guards in that planet, but evidently, that whole area dragged on a little bit too much for something that they didn't end up getting the right code breaker, and they got Benicio del Toro's character, who I thought was going to come back again for being a big name, and because Marvel Studios, he's with Marvel Studios doing the Collector character. I thought maybe Disney would have brought him back to maybe be part of it, but it seemed like, and this is where we can go back to Luke passing away in 1 second.
Sure. Actually, we should have a discussion on Luke in general in that film, I think, at some point.
The Rise of Skywalker, I've never seen a movie series of these three movies compete within itself so much. This was like...
stepping on its own story's toes.
I know the writer guy there who did this movie with JJ, who's the same guy who did Batman vs. Superman. He stated that there was no issue with JJ and Ryan, that there were no cheap shots, but there were a lot that felt, and at least I watched certain parts of the Rise of Skywalker.
Definitely,
like
doubt.
That one-liner to the Holdo maneuver that the actor who plays Merry in Lord of the Rings, who was in the movie, he says, "What about the Holdo maneuver?" So they're literally calling it what everyone in the fandom was calling it, the Holdo maneuver. They called it within the movie, and then Finn goes, "Come on, man, that move was 1 in a million." So they justified that doesn't happen.
And then there was the fact that the Last Jedi broke Hux. He was broken, and they couldn't fix him, so they just had to replace him.
I know. That was another thing. Well,
Another thing?
Listen, Robert E. Grant, I was really happy he was in this. I think he should have been in the movie since The Force Awakens. He's a phenomenal
actor, yes.
He was great, and it was like Hux got killed off by another Hux. Because Hux felt like he lost. Obviously, Ryan made him look like some guy who...
A bitch, yes.
Yeah, and like the whole...
Another jab at Ryan Johnson. That's no way to treat a Jedi weapon.
I was wrong. That was the thing. There were moments like this is why David, you didn't go see in the theater. You mentioned, right? Like
Rise of Skywalker.
No. Right.
No, I saw it.
The way other
that was a smart decision. You didn't give them your money.
Well,
I was happy. What it was going to be.
I was happy I got to watch it in the theater because there's something that's very intimate about watching in the theater. It's a black room, but
it's a different experience.
It's the light screen. It's the screen. The light off the screen comes, and you're in taking away by the story that's being told on the big screen.
Yeah, and I guess with me, I didn't actually become a fan of Star Wars until way after the prequels were
Shame on you.
With...
You missed out on a good area. Anyways, long story short is, watching these movies, you get to have your final decision on your own personal experience within this movie. Because when you're watching it, say on your computer or off a phone. It's not as intimate, and there's distractions depending on if your phone or your other things are going off. You lose that kind of intimacy.
You're not as enamored by it, which is also to the credit of that, not being as enamored by it. You get to observe the story more, and you can break it down more.
Yes.
But that being said, yeah. If you see it in theaters, it would be an amazing experience.
I purposely wanted to go see it because I was not. When the Last Jedi came out, I think I was very, very quiet. I was kind of surprised to see how many people disliked it at first because I hadn't watched it at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was like looking around going, I said to... let me do my bit because it ties in with everything at the moment. I had been very vocal how much I disliked The Force Awakens. And I was being called, a crazy fanboy who can't get over the fact that there was a female lead and stuff. And I'm like, I don't care. Female leads are fine. That's not what it's about. It's about, logically speaking of how things make sense to me. And some things that the choices of certain characters were not making sense. Didn't care who was the lead actor or actress. Now, going to The Last Jedi's anger and fandom split, I didn't say anything. I almost got beside myself to say, well, I told you so, guys. I love this franchise, but it felt like something was off the way certain things were happening in The Force Awakens. Jump to The Rise of Skywalker. Everything that they're trying to meet in the middle to justify what happened in The Last Jedi, it almost like they're trying to correct some of the edits, and that's why I said the cheap shots of things that were being said, it did feel like cheap shots because they had to justify things that didn't make sense in the previous movie.
Right.
But it's like you almost were also trying to correct certain things that maybe did also happen in Force Awakens, but it's done by the same director and so on and so forth. To me, the main stemness of this whole issue is, and this is done by Disney. Not Disney. Everyone prided Disney for how well they constructed the MCU. From the first Iron Man, at least up until Civil War, they had a steady plan going. Maybe not Civil War. I think Civil War, I heard, was put in there to counter Justice League, but that's another time for another discussion. Everyone prided themselves when comparing DC to Marvel. Wow, Marvel has a plan. They know how to stick to it. They know how to have a format, a foundation. They built upon it. All these movies coming out. To see maybe right across the hall, the guys at Lucasfilm with Kathleen Kennedy there, to see how backwards it goes in just 3 movies is fascinating and shocking all together.
To tie it back to what I said about timelines and how if you have the lore master removed, as you create a new continuation of the timeline, you notice the difference in trajectory. You notice the difference in... just story consistency, right?
Actually,
you notice that it's a totally different, I would say, form of writing. It's a totally different storytelling than the original 6, right? And yeah, it is jarring, 100% jarring.
I was kind of surprised because I was thinking, okay, they've done what they've done in other movie franchises and had a steady, style of keeping everything consistent. I mean, there's 22 films in the Infinity Saga, 22 films.
Yeah.
Multiple directors, multiple writers, multiple actors, all coming in and out of that series. Some being killed off, some being, writing their own arcs, going on the sunset, or still around. nothing majorly contradicted other movies. Sure, there was a couple of things, like they made a joke about the Infinity Gauntlet in Thor Ragnarok, because it was seen in previous things, so they made a joke about that. But nothing that completely went 180 from what was going on in a previous film or other films in previous years. Everything was good, made sense, and we saw characters grow throughout this stretch. So when it happens, finally in Infinity War and in the Endgame, where first part of Infinity War, everyone gets their asses kicked. Multiple characters, key characters get killed off. To now, when they finally get redeemed and saved in the final second part of that, which is Endgame, it's a profound moment. And then the defeat of Thanos is a profound moment. When you get that moment in Star Wars from episode 7, 8, and 9, you feel like you're kind of shortchanged.
Well, I mean, I guess
rushed it was, and how inconsistent it was, and also the fact that people, I don't know, people argue against long movies. They don't want to watch The Irishman, but The Irishman, you can watch it anytime you want on Netflix. It's very easy. You don't have to go and pay money at a theater to go and take yourself away. If you can't finish The Irishman, you can pause it, go back. I like long movies.
So do I.
I think
that was my thing with the Rise of Skywalker. I kind of felt the same way probably that you did after The Last Jedi. There was no possible way they could explain all of the questions they raised in one last 2-hour movie.
I counter-argument myself right now going to say that I love long movies. I wish it was a 3-hour movie, The Rise of Skywalker, to justify how to fix so much. But when you see what a long movie can do, which is a whole lot of nothing, which is what you've said, I'm quoting you, Tommy, on this, about The Last Jedi.
Yes.
You kind of have an issue. I also thought certain characters were overexposed in the 7, 8, 9 series. Rey was overexposed. Mm-hmm. And overexposure, I'll even plug it back.
Overexposed, but we still don't know anything about what kind of person she is.
Yeah, but it's overexposed in certain elements. In the prequels and in the original 4, 5, and 6, George Lucas doesn't introduce anything that's ridiculously different in the for Force users. Sure, there's a couple of more flips and choreography, fantastic choreography for lightsaber duels. Fine, compared to Obi-Wan and Darth Vader in Episode 4, and then continuing on. Regardless,
we'll get into choreography. Don't worry.
Yeah. But I mean, in that sense, there's nothing like this ridiculous new Force abilities that we're learning as we go along each movie. You know what I mean? That's also something that was a lot more distasteful in certain cases. Like, these different abilities. The fact that, you could just use the Force as if it's the same thing as, like, I don't know, pulling out a Swiss Army knife. I don't know. Like, Obi-Wan did it to show you his ability in Episode 2 there with the guy who's harassing him about death sticks, and he makes him go away with the Force, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Rey, uses it to get herself released, but she just found out what the Force was an hour ago. She's already using a Jedi mind trick on the guy.
I was genuinely thinking that she had her memory wiped or something, and then she must have had some training. That was the only way to explain that.
And you know what? Maybe then I might have sucked it up and said, "Wow, maybe I did jump to conclusions," but I shouldn't have to get that. I think
I know what you mean.
I think audiences now are a little bit more, especially with the internet, we're a little bit more smarter, or we jump to theories faster than we did before. We don't let things play out because it's difficult.
I think that's one of the problems. I mean, I don't care if people figure out the plot. If I figure out the plot before it happens, I don't care, as long as it's well executed. But some movie makers seem to have this bias that, like...
Right, 100%. And another thing I'll say, watching the trailer for The Revenge of the Sith, you're already understanding that Palpatine is the bad guy in that trailer. When it shows Mace Windu, Samuel Jackson confronting him.
I know there were a lot of people at the time of the prequels debating whether Palpatine was a clone of Sidious or not, and so that reveal shot at the end,
but still, right? Like, because again, also they changed his face changes too, right? But you don't see that in the trailer. But still,
well, that's kind of why you have that reveal shot where he puts his hood on, and that's basically the reveal.
The trailer hits you, but you're not, and it gives you that kind of like plot twist. But also, there's other stuff in the trailer that makes you second guess. But that's the trailer, right? And that also reveals quite a bit. I would have been fine with that in the trailer, and then it's still properly executed. I got what I was like. That's why I enjoy Revenge of the Sith as my favorite movie out of this entire series because it hits you so hard with that Order 66. You're not seeing it coming. You know the Empire forms, but you don't know how they do it. You don't you weren't seeing it. And I know there's a lot of actors or characters like Kea Mundi who were in The Phantom Menace. They don't have a lot of speaking roles, but they were still from those movies that you see them die. And if you've watched those movies like I did endlessly because there were 3-year gaps, you watch those movies repeatedly, they feel like they're more significant because you watch them over and over and over again in the same episode 1 and 2 and over again. And so when it happened in 3, they felt like, oh shit, like this is crazy. It was like the Red Wedding before there was a Red Wedding episode for Star Wars, and when you're watching Order 66. And
I mean, I've already discussed with you my, opinions on some of the time management decisions they made with the prequels, but, I understand everything that happened in the prequels made sense in the end, but...
And it doesn't mess up too much, or, at a catastrophic rate, 4, 5, and 6. Though, and I can't say 7, 8, and 9 do, because you can still watch 4, 5, and 6, and 1, 2, and 3, and be satisfied with that chapter ending the whole series. These movies are...
I also want to, say, why we need to know who the hell Snoke is and where he came from. I mean, in the end, we figure out he's just a test tube Palpatine creation, but... No, the reason why we needed to know that was...
I'm every voice inside your head.
No, because we need... Basically, what Episode 7 was like. Actually, I remember after watching the films, my parents were like, Oh, I really like that film. Oh, they could make prequels to this film, too. And I'm just thinking, well, that's the problem, that they can make a bunch of prequels to these films now. They shouldn't have needed to make prequels to these films. Also... Another thing, it's like, this is what Episode 7 is like. I mean, with you not explain... This is what Episode 7 is like now, that we can see they explained almost nothing of anything that happened in that film. What Episode 7 is like, it's like if... Let's take a hypothetical universe where Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, and Episode 2, Attack of the Clones, comes out... And then right after Attack of the Clones, A New Hope comes out. What the fuck happened?
Yeah.
And they said, you don't need that explained.
Well, even, maybe, again, and then going back to my overexposure comment, was the fact that when you were watching 6, 5, 4, and then 1, 2, and 3... all of those movies, they're 3 years apart from the film releases, right? There's some time to absorb and then go back to the drawing board and then make a sequel to those movies. Now, obviously, the timeline too is expanded because from 1 to 2 it's 10 years, from 2 to 3 it's 3 years. It's 19/20 years from 3 to 4. 4 to 5, I believe it's a year.
Well, it's... Oh, are you talking about the timeline in lore of the films? Okay, no, this is how it is. From episode 4 to episode 5 is 3 years. There's 3 years in between then, and then there's 1 year in between episode 5 and 6. Okay. And in the prequels, we know it's 10 years between episode 1 and episode 2, and 3 years between episode 2 and episode 3.
Yeah, and then 19...
What I say is fact.
Yeah, and then 19 between 3 and 4. Okay. 7 and 8. 8 is literally starting right after, I don't know how long after the events of, I think it's like a week, or no, not
it's
even.
A few seconds.
No, or hours. I think it's hours.
I think they, jump back and forth. Because...
No, it's hours. I think it's hours because Finn is coming out of, the recovery from his... obviously what happened to him on Starkiller Base with Kylo Ren.
But then they do go back a bit, to show the result of... unless, of course...
I'm talking just about from movies. From movie to when I'm watching... when the credits start to roll in Episode 7 to when the opening crawl happens and the opening scene happens to Episode 8. It's literally a couple hours because then the First Order show up. Whereas from Episode 8, The Last Jedi, to Episode 9, The Rise of Skywalker, it's 1 year. And that's why they've said on that new planet there.
I had no idea.
It was 1 year. that's already really close. When you're looking at it, it's it's the same way if you're going to actually critique the Nolan Batman films. Batman technically is only Batman for one whole year, then goes into hiding after the effects of the Joker, and it's 8 years after. That's it for Batman. Jump. Batman Begins, and then Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. It's very, very short window for him being Batman, but that's neither here or there. Mm-hmm. So yeah, this is again another short window of these three films. We're talking much of the plot of Rise of Skywalker. I feel that when they're having to go around now and she's training, right? Rey's finally training. We didn't see that at all.
She's not training in the Last Jet. Oh, you're talking about Rise of Skywalker.
I'm going to stick to Rise of Skywalker for pretty much the and this is where David will come in for it too. With it, there is absolutely like no training for her in 7 or 8, but again, they're right after each other with timeline. Whereas 8 to 9, it's a full year. She's spent a year with Leia. Somehow Leia is capable of training Jedi, but it shows that Jedi, she was literally on her last day of training. She decided to give up it because
frankly,
of
at this point, I'm questioning why Rey even needs training. She clearly doesn't need training. We didn't based on what we saw.
We didn't know that until it was finally justified in the movie when Rey meets Force Ghost Luke. To say, on her last day of her training, she decided to put away her lightsaber because she saw a vision of would lead to the death of her son if she continued her training. Yes. That is the only reason why I'm saying, okay. When we first see it, you're interpreting what she can train Jedi. Okay, because then Rey's doing the training course and she's doing all these things. Not to mention she's floating with 50,000 rocks around her because they got to make it
which is extremely powerful.
Yeah,
that's a very powerful force act to be committing. But before that, like 7 and 8, like you said, short timeline or short time jump in between the two movies. Mm-hmm. So Rey, if anything, while you're seeing like little bits of her training in Last Jedi, she's only spent how long? Maybe a week. Like very short amount of time to train. She wouldn't even be that experienced with a lightsaber.
I don't even know, like the events of Force Awakens from when you're watching the beginning of the film to the end of the film. I don't know how long that timeline is. And obviously, they only have hours to deal with. Actually, it's always hours, I'm noticing. Between, because even Last Jedi, they're struggling because they only have hours of fuel left. And then Rise of Skywalker, they only have, when they first set out for their mission, they have about 16 hours till the launch of the fleet and out of Exegol. Yeah. And it isn't until that they get to, I believe it's the planet where they go and find the remnants of the old Death Star that they have about another additional 8 hours, but then, she defeats Kylo and goes and flies away in his ship to exile herself, the same way Luke does. And that's what I mean. Like, there's just a lot of things happening that you're kind of absorbing at once, and it's like you don't know.
It's one story beat after the other in a super fast, rushed pace, and yet it's still a very long film length. So because of that, you have so much information to absorb. Mm-hmm. You start forgetting plot points before, which is fine because the writers did too. And you just see stuff get like stepping on each other's toes. Now, just because we're starting to get into training and into the combat side, Force Awakens, Rey should have had zero chance defeating Kylo Ren.
Well, as
Kylo Ren spent how long training with Luke Skywalker?
I don't even want to. I don't want to cut him off, and I don't want to cut you off. That's the only thing. That was another issue I had with Finn. But they said Finn had the training with that traitor.
Sure, but he also doesn't have Force abilities to.
Which is why Kylo Ren should have grabbed him immediately and tossed him to like the nearest tree. The same way he grabbed that one officer after the officer asked who these soothsayers were at the beginning of Rise of Skywalker, right? Like that.
Even if Finn was Force sensitive, he had no training, and Kylo could have just choked him to death for free. Just for free. And then Rey also didn't have much Force training, but she was, has high raw power, so maybe Kylo can't use his Force on her. But Kylo has years with Luke? Yeah, years of training in becoming a Jedi, so therefore, years of lightsaber combat training. Rey literally Force grabs that saber, and it is the first time that she is using and wielding this lightsaber. She should be long dead at the end of Force Awakens.
Unless, of course, it turned out that her memories were wiped and she actually did have training, but, that's
wouldn't matter.
Again, we're not here to correct the studio mistakes by trying to justify with our own fan theories. Now,
these aren't fan theories. These were theories I had, going into The Last Jedi, but now that it's the way that it is, yes, it makes no sense.
Right.
I agree, completely agree.
Purely based on what we see in the movies, Rey has no lightsaber training. Kylo Ren has years of lightsaber training. She should be dead in the end of the first movie.
Exactly, yes.
Or the Force wills it, and that that giant fissure that happens in the
that happens before they.
That should have happened. Yeah, right when Rey gets a hold of the lightsaber. Okay, now Rey has the lightsaber. Now the Force divides them and keeps Kylo from getting to her. But also that fissure shouldn't be enough to divide them because Force jumping is a thing. And we see that all in the prequels all the time, where they jump insane heights, right? Insane distances. Beyond that, while we're just talking about lightsabers real quick, that lightsaber, the Kylo Ren's lightsaber with the keons that come out the side, the cross guard, shouldn't work. It shouldn't work. And if it does work, fine. If somebody were to clash their sabers and then graze it down to the hilt, you notice that the crossguard has two vents of lightsaber energy coming out the sides, and then a corner of metal, a corner of the actual lightsaber piece itself. That is metal. If you graze the blade right into the crossguard, and if if Kylo Ren used the crossguard for what it's meant to, stopping the blade from touching your hand, it doesn't matter. It's going to cut through that corner of the lightsaber, break the lightsaber, maybe blow up his hand, or the lightsaber grazing attack, where you're grazing the blade into the crossguard, will just go right through and then cut off his hands.
I don't know.
That crossguard is just. It's foolish. It's not.
I don't know the breakdown of his lightsaber. Does he have 3 kyber crystals in there?
No,
or is it just the one?
It's just the one with side venting.
No, it's in lore. The reason it's like that is because it's a broken crystal.
No, I know. I know the
has
Fury.
A side venting.
I know the Fury. I just mean sometimes obviously Darth Maul's lightsaber, that one has 2 crystals on either side. That's the only reason why I can do it. That's what I'm trying to say. If there's 3, does that mean it's because there's like 2 little ones and one massive one?
No, it's a broken crystal.
Honestly,
this is actually that's not just a theory. That's established.
I know the Fury crystals have been seen since I remember watching The Force Unleashed. You could choose to have a blue lightsaber, or you could have it unstable because it's the Fury side of that color. It's not.
But honestly, what kind of crystal is it? It doesn't matter. The design of the hilt is such that if you graze a lightsaber blade into the crossguard side vents, you are putting that lightsaber on the metal of that other lightsaber. We have seen lightsabers get cut off before, right? So that blade can easily cut through a lightsaber hilt. So why is it not cutting through the corner of the crossguard? Kylo has used the crossguard before.
I mean,
it makes no sense. No. And also, there's a lot, and this is a choreography thing, like an actual lightsaber choreography thing. You see a lot of what I call fort-to-fort blade clashing. So imagine a blade divided up into 3 sections, where you have the tip of the blade and the foible, which is like the 3 inches of the actual extension of the blade, and then you have the whole mid blade right in the actual center, and then down toward the hilt you have the fort, which is it's the strongest point of a blade, and you gain the most mechanical leverage if you're clashing 2 swords if you were to parry on the fort. But if you were to strike your fort onto their fort, nobody has mechanical leverage. And if they're lightsabers, both people are in incredible amounts of danger because there's so much lightsaber blade exposed on either side, where they can both get clipped by it. But if they're both striking fort for fort on that lightsaber keyon, like the side crossguard with those corners of metal are going to be taking extreme amounts of heat, right? Instead of just the heat coming out of the exhaust port of the lightsaber, you just have extreme amounts of heat of 2 blades clashing together. The lightsaber hilt should be melting at those corners where the crossguard comes out of. No matter what, there are multiple reasons and multiple situations in each movie where Kylo Ren's lightsaber should have either been destroyed or just completely be ineffective to defend himself when he ever tries to use that crossguard.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, just for even certain things that may or may not have made sense. I mean, but to me, the firepower of anything that was First Order or bad guy didn't make sense to me because it just didn't. they never really won with it, apart from the 5 planets they destroy in The Force Awakens.
Yeah, but then the Last Jedi starts with the First Order reigns supreme. I didn't realize they were reigning at this point.
Yeah,
I
we didn't
thought
really
they were just
see...
like some faction, Imperial loyalists.
Apart from the,
there was supposed to be a remnant faction.
That's what I assumed.
Apart from the village,
the Last Jedi.
No, I'm saying the village massacre at the beginning of the first episode 7. That's one part. Otherwise, it's like they just had 5 Alderons happen in episode 7.
We also never get an explanation on who that guy was.
Who had the map to Luke Skywalker?
Yeah, that guy.
We don't get an explanation of who those 5 planets were. Those 5 planets had no emotional attachment to us.
You have to read the books to figure that out.
Right, which is another...
Don't put it in the movie then.
Yeah.
Or explain who they are. You know, that's just another weak story point. But
100%, because apparently one of them planets was where the New Republic's capital was. Coruscant still existed, but the New Republic had it on one of those
J.J. Abrams
planets.
originally wanted that to be Coruscant, because it actually looked like Coruscant. I thought it was Coruscant when I first saw the film.
Mm-hmm. A little bit.
To me, I just was like, you're gonna... It's like, I don't know. It's like you're destroying certain movies that are, or not certain movies, certain planets that are wholesome to the movies to have some type of emotional backlash or outcry.
Well,
from the fans
it wasn't
that, like, oh my God,
in the end. But...
which is what I thought they did for Han Solo, was the sacrificial lamb for basically, a promotional, move to get that. Like, this is the movie that kills Han Solo. That's why it's significant. But, watching the movie,
no matter who made Episode 7, Han Solo was going to die. I don't think Harrison Ford would have signed on to the movie unless he was going to be dead by the end of the film.
Well, spoiler alert, he came back for Episode 9.
Yeah, but just for one scene.
Still, I mean, if you're done with it, you're done with it. Like, I don't know.
Now, since I'm still... I've just gotten into talking about stunt stuff. This is one thing that the stunt coordinator for the new trilogy was allowed to do, I'll say, where for some reason Kylo Ren's lightsaber swings were slow. It's as if he were swinging a heavy lightsaber, which makes no sense because the blade of a lightsaber is weightless, but the idea of it being of him swinging that lightsaber slower, it visually looks okay only because of the crossguard, the side keons of those extra little ports of lightsaber energy coming out the sides. Because of the shape of that blade, it looks like it's a bigger, heavier sword that he's swinging. The problem is, a lightsaber blade is weightless. So, and his actual grip, the actual hilt, is, it's only a little bit longer than a conventional, well, what I say conventional lightsaber, like what you would assume. It's a two-hander grip being used on a sword that is still weightless. So for him to be swinging it slowly still makes no sense. But it justified it in I guess all 3 movies, but it justified it in the first movie where Kylo was able to be, quote-unquote, defeated by Rey because Rey had no training, but also Kylo was swinging very slowly. Kylo wasn't using any sort of complex blade movement or compound attacks to really throw Rey off and get a kill stroke. He should have known these compound attacks because of years of lightsaber training. And his teacher also was doing compound attacks back in the original 3, when, especially Return of the Jedi, when he's fighting Darth Vader on the second Death Star. Which, by the way, that second Death Star, it was not done yet, right? But why would the Emperor try to rebuild something that has been previously destroyed if he knew about the other 2 super weapons that he had access to, the Planet Destroyer?
I didn't get the impression that he was trying to rebuild it. I got the impression that they retconned what happened in Return of the Jedi and said, like, oh, those were just the remnants of the Death Star. It fell from the...
Interesting.
From the sky. They just ignored the fact that it was completely blown up.
Okay.
That's what the explanation was, from what I've heard.
I took a little tangent anyway. So, to compare... right now, I'm comparing the lightsaber choreography between the 3 trilogies.
Well, actually, in regards to whether a lightsaber blade is heavy or not, that's actually not quite concrete in terms of lore. I know in the original trilogy, they originally had the intention that these blades were heavy. If you look at the way Luke is carrying his lightsaber, he carries it with 2 hands. All of the Force users you see in the original trilogy, they carry it with 2 hands at all times.
Yes.
In interviews, they even said it was because they were meant to be heavy. It wasn't until you got to the prequels when they started doing up.
They are weightless.
Yes.
And the thing is, like, you then have to... I mean, this is all theoretical physics at this point, because they never really explained the physics of the lightsaber blade. Is it just pure energy, or is it plasma? That'll define the mass a little bit. But beyond that, it actually makes sense for a weapon such as a lightsaber to be only held with 2 hands.
You know what, this is really, and I'm sorry to cut you off there, but this is perfect for what you were saying, because you were going to talk about the choreography between all 3 trilogies. I had this quote from J.J. Abrams. This is, I think, when he was talking about, Force Awakens and going in with the choreography of it. He said deciding to do the approach for the choreography was similar to how he wanted to do in the original trilogy. Because Abrams stated that in the prequel trilogy, choreography was increasingly spectacular and stylized. Almost like a dance choreography, but that it was not what he really wanted to go for in the new films. And he says, when you look at Star Wars and Empire... they are very different lightsaber battles. They, for me, felt more powerful because they were not quite as sleek. I was hoping to go for something much more primitive and aggressive and rougher. A throwback to the kind of heart-stopping lightsaber fights I remember as being, so enthralled by as a kid. And that's what he says going with, the choreography style of the sequel trilogy.
Yes.
Now, again, I will respect that notion because it so perfectly falls in the way that this is the post-Empire era.
Right.
Pre-Republic era, where... Again, information of, the Force and stuff like that was different.
They had the Jedi Order and they had the Sith Order, like they had, books on, like, different...
Remember, Luke Skywalker in the Rise of Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi says at the height of their power. So the Jedi at the height of their power, and even at the Sith at the height of their power, were way supreme compared to the Jedi of Episode 4, 5, and 6, 7, 8, 9, and the Sith of 4,
in terms
5,
of
6,
their
7,
skill,
8.
yes, but not in terms of their connection to the Force.
Because again, like I was trying to break it down, the back to basics style of going back and going into primitive style of separating yourself and having to recalculate what the Force was to you as an individual Jedi.
Right.
And that goes back to your choreography part.
Yes, it exactly does. So, if you were to think about realistically wielding a lightsaber, you would want to have 2 hands, because if you were to do one-handed, flourishes and all these crazy windmill strikes.
You'd probably need a shorter handle then.
If you didn't, no, I mean the handle's adequate. But if you were to do one-handed choreo combat with a blade that is it's not only double-sided, but it can just cut immediately and burn on contact. If you're to use that kind of weapon one-handed without force powers, you're easily going to just clip yourself and burn yourself or cut yourself with these lightsabers. Now, that's why it makes a little bit of sense as to why in the original trilogy they're wielding them two-handed. However, they all have force powers. And because of that, they have foresight, which Qui-Gon Jinn referenced in the beginning of, or not the beginning, like early on in Phantom Menace, where they're able to see a little bit into the future, which gives them quicker reaction timing. And the way that they depict this is when Jar Jar Binks goes to eat a piece of food off the table, he projects his tongue out to grab the food with his tongue and then bring it back in. And then when Qui-Gon Jinn is talking about the reaction timing, he manages to literally pinch his tongue because his foresight allowed it. So now, if every Jedi has that foresight, then it actually justifies them using one-handed choreography, one-handed combat, and it also justifies the crazy spectacular choreography you see in the prequels. Because if both fighters can see just a few seconds into the future, then they can plan their moves multiple steps ahead, which is why it looks a lot like choreography. It looks a lot like a dance as opposed to a fight, because they're already seeing the moves ahead of time, and they're confidently executing these moves, and they're confidently going through this choreography, and they don't have to worry, the actors don't have to worry about being so gritty and realistic. They really just have to nail this complex choreography, because both characters have foresight and years of training.
I think there was an elegance in certain cases of watching certain fights from 1 through 6, because and they were two different eras. I liked some of the spectacular and choreography dance styles that were of even the Duel of Fate style that happens in the Phantom Menace between Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul. That's some people put that as the best of all time in terms of the full fight of all lightsaber battles. I honestly think it's close second. My favorite will always be Anakin versus Obi-Wan. I think that one's phenomenal. Revenge of the Sith.
Yeah.
I think the lightsaber fight between Rey and Kylo, it's difficult to... Well, there's none in the Last Jedi. I think it's the only movie where two lightsabers don't make contact with each other. Apart from that flashback scene with with Luke and Kylo Ren.
That's
there.
True,
In the,
yes.
it's the only one, but otherwise...
Literal just a clash, too. Not a fight. It's just a clash.
Otherwise, everything else, there's nothing. And every single Star Wars film has been that one pinnacle lightsaber duel. That's why I was saying I've said to Tommy before, but a lot of other friends, then they ask me about why I like Revenge of the Sith. Every other Star Wars movie had that one signature lightsaber fight. Revenge of the Sith has multiple.
Right.
And it's really cool. You got Mace Windu versus Sidious is really cool. Obi-Wan versus Sidious is unreal in the Senate chambers there. Obi-Wan and Anakin, can't argue that.
Oh, you mean Yoda?
Sorry,
Yoda and Sidious.
Who did I say?
Obi-Wan. Yeah, that's good.
Sorry, Yoda and Sidious in the Senate chambers, my bad. Obi-Wan and Anakin, that was phenomenal. I mean, Grievous, too, in that little moment there that he has with Obi-Wan is really cool. And then, obviously, you got Dooku and that kind of stuff there going on in that chamber area of the capital ship. So I just enjoyed it. I thought they had, multiple areas of, fighting and that kind of style and choreography. Watching the Rise of Skywalker fight, I enjoyed that one. I thought it was kind of cool with the water. I think they were trying to do a contrast to the fire.
A little bit.
You know what fight I really liked in the Rise of Skywalker? I really liked the fight between Kylo Ren and the Knights of Ren when he pulls
Well, I was going to bring that up for David for choreography, because someone else in the community, they pointed out Kylo Ren does this move where he takes the lightsaber, puts it straight up behind his back and then waits for someone to hit it, then reacts, then moves, and it's kind of similar to when they were critiquing the fact of how that botch scene in the chambers, Snoke's chambers there with the Red Guards, how some guys could have easily chopped at them.
Oh, yeah.
And they left the camera rolling, and they should have just done more cuts to justify that these guys were being outmatched by Rey and Kylo. So when the Knights of Ren scene happened, it was kind of something similar. He waited again. It's there's how many of them? I don't know how many there are, but
one of the big reasons why I like,
and it's well beyond his foresight is seeing that guy coming. No, it is just he put that blade behind his back and waited for the other performer to attack. The spacing of the timing was too weird. In Snoke's chamber, you actually see, if you look at the shot slow-mo, you see performers in the background. I don't know what those guards are called. The honor guards. I'll call
honestly, they were.
You see some of those honor guards literally just take. They sell an impact that never happened, but it buys time for the character to be dealing with other honor guards. You see in the background a couple characters, nothing hit them, but yet their head recoils back and they stagger back, but nothing hit them. You'll never notice that watching it at first, and it's hard to notice it watching it on a theater screen because first off, you can't pause frame for frame and other stuff like that, but you're also so enamored with the fight, your focus is all on the main characters, so you don't really notice the stuff in the background that is buying the characters time to keep going. Beyond that, there's so many opportunities in group fights, just in general too. This is a movie thing in general. A one person versus two or more trained fighters is usually an impossible battle. There has to be a little bit of story writing woo-woo to happen for that character to survive ever.
Yeah.
And
I was more liking that fight because of, again, Adam Driver's performance in that scene. I could see the gears turning in his head as that fight was going on.
Yeah. He performed well as an actor.
Oh, he did. I didn't... I didn't get that in a lot of the other films before the sequel trilogy. I'm not saying that makes the sequel trilogy better than the other films, but that's just a little... Actually, this brings me to another subject. I mean, I didn't go into every little detail about what... like I said, everything that happened in the prequels made sense, but I would have probably spent time on different things than they ended up spending time on in the end with the prequels during some points. And for that reason, I would honestly I would love to adapt the prequels into like a 2 or 3 hour play, personally.
That'd be interesting.
It wouldn't change fundamentally what happens, but it would focus on different things. It would focus just specifically on Anakin Skywalker, is what I would do. I mean, because one of my I think I told you this the other day, was I think a lot of Episode 1, all the political machinations and stuff with Palpatine, that was all genius. I won't deny that, but there was a lot of Episode 1 that I feel like wasn't needed and could have been explained in dialogue, personally. And I think that the Clone Wars should have been a bigger part of the films. I would have... Episode 1, to me, I would have, made Episode 1 be most of what happened in Episode 2. And, maybe you get a little flashback at the beginning of, Anakin and how he came, and that could have even been chalked down to dialogue, and then Episode 2 would be the Clone Wars, and then Episode 3 would be Episode 3. And I feel like it would have been cleaner that way, but I'll go into more details about that later. But like I said, I'd adapt that idea, that frame of mind into a play. Like I said, I would have liked to see more of how Anakin feels about the fact that the Republic basically just made a slave race, basically. That's what the clones were. I felt I should have seen that affect Anakin far more than it seemed to, just from my watching those 3 films alone. Obviously, I get that when I actually look into the Clone Wars lore and, books in the extended universe, but that's something I would have liked to see in the films, a little bit more of that.
Well, in the films, when you're watching them, they're at the pinnacle moments of the actual specific events. When you're watching the Clone Wars series, then it tackles those certain debates and certain angles. Because then you even see, especially in the Clone Wars animation series, you're seeing the other side of the Separatist planets and why are these people joining the Separatists? And you're seeing how they feel that there's corruption within the Senate. That's why they decided to separate. So they're not all bad. They're just...
I know.
They're seeing through the BS.
I would have preferred if we spent more time on that in the films than some of the stuff we ended up spending time on in the end, though.
If I may pitch...
the story still made it to where it had to go.
Of course, it made sense, but I just, like I said, my issues with the prequels more have to do with time management and performance than anything.
You're saying, David?
If I may pitch the time management for Phantom Menace... By the way, love Phantom Menace, right? But
I'm happy that you do.
If I were to make my own ideal timeline for Phantom Menace, the way it played out, for sure keep the journey of Anakin Skywalker as a kid. Yeah, keep that, and keep the Battle of Naboo. Now, instead, increase the military power of the Naboo soldiers defending their city, their capital city. Mm-hmm. Remove the Gungans. Just remove them. Take all that screen time and put it to the story of Sifo Dyas. Mm-hmm. Put it to the actual forming of the clone army in general. If they opened up, I bet you, if they opened up Phantom Menace instead of the Jedi meeting the Separatists during committing to their blockade over Naboo, instead, if they went to Kamino and they showed what have you, they would have showed something a bit about Sifo Dyas. Beginning the clone project, right?
Yeah.
You would have seen Jango Fett involved in that opening scene.
I also would have loved a lot more. I would have had Count Dooku in the first film,
and and he would be called Tyrannus in that first part of the film.
I honestly think,
or in that scene that I'm describing.
for that, I don't mind. I think, David, you probably have made a stronger point in that case of expanding more on the events of Phantom Menace and taking out certain things like the Gungans.
It would connect into the Attack of the Clones better.
I think
it would have made Attack of the Clones play out better.
Because to me, watching it as a kid, the Attack of the Clones, the Sifo Dyas angle kind of came out to me on left field. Because when you watch the Phantom Menace, there's nothing that you only hear through some character mentioning the name of Sifo Dyas that was killed 10 years prior.
They just used pure expositional dialogue to justify the clone army.
Right, and
instead,
I would have preferred
something
used scene
time
a Phantom Menace scene. Yeah, something in Phantom Menace to finish off. Because I don't know who Sifo Dyas is connected to through the Jedi Order. Because I've said to Tommy the training lineages: Yoda, Count Dooku, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan. Anakin/Luke, and so on and so forth. And that's the training lineage. And I was trying to figure out if Sifo Dyas and how he's connected to any through lineage of training, or like is he on the angle of Mace Windu's side of training, or
right.
So that would have
been better if he was.
It would have been cool just because then there was a connection there, and one of those characters would have gone to Sifo, hey, we have a special task for you. And I think honestly, which I'm led to believe, who the mastermind behind it is, Dooku goes to tell Sifo Dyas to go do that, and he's the man behind it. He's the mastermind. So Sifo on his own merit goes and does the whole Camino negotiation process, and then is killed, I believe, because I think they played off in the Clone Wars animation series. And I think that would have been good, which makes sense of why Dooku should have been then in the Phantom Menace to begin with.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Well, also, like I said, with my idea, one of the reasons why I frankly didn't need to see too much of Anakin as a kid was because of, well, the tone in which they handled that slavery business. I don't know, I think it was way too lighthearted for such a deep...
A dark concept.
Well, with all due respect, lighthearted...
And, I think it would have been more powerful for that to be expositional, that to be alluded to, than to actually be shown. If you couldn't actually... Because I understand they're family films in the end, so you can't show that type of... I didn't need to see that.
Well,
I would have preferred that to be left to imagination.
Not necessarily. Fox, who did 1 through 6, took risks compared to 7, 8, 9's Disney portrayal.
I'm not saying they didn't.
No,
that doesn't make me think that slavery stuff was handled as well as it could have been.
Well, being a slave is a slave.
Yeah.
I mean, not everyone has to be whipped in chains, but I mean, being slave is a slave. I mean, Anakin and his mother still had to answer to that, to their slave masters for whatever it is.
Everybody has to answer to someone. We're all slaves in the end.
We're gonna get all
frank.
All right, let's get all philosophical. Long story short is Fox's risk taking when it came to people losing limbs and whatnot was more evident in 1 through 6. Compared to 7, 8, and 9. Yeah, sure, we had that one red guard get the lightsaber through his skull. That's probably the most vicious thing I can think of. Other than that, I can't really think of too many other people.
And, well, the other thing with the prequels, well, as it is now, with everything I know, all the expanded lore I consumed, I love Qui-Gon Jinn. I think he's a great character. But if I'm being frank, from my point of view, I think a lot of those books and expanded lore on Qui-Gon Jinn, on his role and everything, how he thought, his opinions, it almost seemed they needed that in order to justify his existence, because without that stuff, I feel that a lot of the stuff that Qui-Gon Jinn did, they could have attributed that role to Obi-Wan Kenobi, which actually, if you go look up, that was George Lucas's original intention, and that, frankly, would have lined up a lot more with what we heard in the original trilogy, that, Obi-Wan was the one who found him, and, well, then there was... And I also think of the stuff with Uncle Owen as well. Obi-Wan... I wish I took a look at this before I came here, but Obi-Wan says something to Luke to the effect of, well, your Uncle Owen thinks of your father, he was just following crazy Obi-Wan on some foolhardy crusade. I think Uncle Owen should have been involved from the very beginning, and, like, you know, they could have had some dynamic where he was, like, jealous of Anakin, like, for, you know, he gets to be a Jedi, he's Force sensitive, but they are still brothers, like, because, I don't know, as it is, that dialogue, I'm not saying it ruins everything, but I think they could have paid more attention, and, like, it could have been done more cleanly.
Well, Owen doesn't come in till Attack of the Clones.
I know, I think that's a problem, personally.
Yeah.
I think Owen was way too minor.
But it's only because that Shmi is finally free and
Owen has
someone
such antagonistic feelings towards Obi-Wan, and I have no idea why.
Well,
It's true. Yeah.
He's grumpy old man in the end, right? Like,
well, I don't know. I think you could have added more depth to that.
well, I mean, I don't know. From my perspective, when you meet Owen, Lars the first time, and his father, it's Anakin who they meet. They don't meet Obi-Wan. When you watch it in when you watch it in Revenge of the Sith, Obi-Wan shows up with a baby and drops it on their doorstep, essentially.
But then, like, Obi-Wan says shit like, "Oh, you know, Owen didn't like that. Anakin was following me on my foolhardy crusade. He didn't even know about your foolhardy crusade. He didn't even know who the hell you were." Mm-hmm. I don't know. That doesn't line up to me.
That's true, though. That's an inconsistency between the original three and then the prequel trilogy. That's an inconsistency there. One thing I want to touch, because we touched on it a little bit earlier, but one thing I want to get to is comparing the original 6 to the sequel trilogy.
There's no comparison.
In language. In the way the language was used.
Right.
So, Star Wars always gets a criticism of their writing being either clunky dialogue or just overly simplistic dialogue, or like too literal. And I think a way to justify why that is, imagine if your language becomes the common tongue for the entire galaxy, where you have aliens that have entirely different biologies, different vocal cords, different languages, but now they are also learning these common tongue. Wouldn't the English language of that time and in that setting, I would say evolve, but evolve into a more simplistic way of speaking, where you are, you know, even Yoda has his own way of speaking English, right? Mm-hmm. How many other alien species have their own way of speaking English, and then the actual human commoner has to be very simplistic in their dialogue just to get their point across.
You know what's interesting about Yoda?
Maybe get some business done in the galaxy, right? Mm-hmm. So that's what justifies the overly simplistic language. Now, the sequel trilogy, they went to more natural dialogue, right? More natural ways of speaking that you see on Earth now, right? Remember, though, this is still a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So, one huge problem that I had with Rise of Skywalker, and it was this one singular moment where they reveal the Knights of Ren. They are walking down a hallway with Kylo Ren donning his newly fused together fixed mask, and the Knights of Ren are walking down the hallway with them, and they turn a corner with 2 common stormtroopers that are guarding a door for whatever reason. And one stormtrooper looks at the other and goes, "The Knights of Ren." And the other one looks at him and goes, "Goals. Goals." Like, you know goals when a Gen Z 20-year-old of Earth today says goals in envious or admiration towards someone else for something they have done, or just for maybe a relationship they have had, whatever, right? Goals. You know what that is. Nowhere in a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away would they use such a slang from Earth 2019/2020. No way. Absolutely no way.
While we're still talking about the way people speak in the trilogy and stuff, this was actually one of my main issues with Anakin Skywalker, how he was portrayed in the prequel trilogy compared to him as Darth Vader in the original trilogy. The way Darth Vader spoke, actually, I just recently found this out. There's a specific word for his type of accent. And I just found out I've apparently been unconsciously speaking with this accent for my entire life. I didn't know there was a word for it, but it's called a transatlantic accent.
Okay.
It's a very affected way of speaking. It's essentially like a hybrid between British and American. And, well, you see, the way Darth Vader was being portrayed, there was something ridiculously elegant about him. He almost seemed to be, to me, like he was an anti-version of Obi-Wan to an extent. Like, the witty comeback, they both had witty comebacks, and they were both incredibly elegant, but, like, kind of on a different perspective. Obi-Wan would say more philosophical things like, who's the fool who follows him, or the fool himself? And Darth Vader would say, things like, I find your lack of faith disturbing, or the ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force. Like,
right.
He had a certain way of speaking, and
it was very heavy, it was very intimidating, but just because of the way he was delivering this very deliberate speech, very heavily delivered speech, where each word weighs heavy on the mind of who he's speaking
and
to.
I felt that was like I didn't see any reason. I didn't think Anakin Skywalker should be exactly like Darth Vader, but I still think he should have maintained some of that natural charisma he had as Darth Vader. There was just something to his personality, and something elegant about him. I didn't get that from Hayden Christensen, and personally, I know there's an explanation for it now, that he was just that wasn't actually his voice. It was just a computer interpreting his thoughts, but I don't know, I found that kind of lame. I would have preferred to find an actor who, I could believe their voice would morph into James Earl Jones in the end. That's what I would have preferred. And, even with George Lucas, the original person he wanted to cast as Anakin Skywalker was Leonardo DiCaprio, and right there, that tells me, he didn't have the idea for this character that I would have liked. He just wanted basically to make Anakin Skywalker an edgier version of Luke, which I don't know, I thought he should have been more than that. I thought he should have been his own character. Basically what he did with him in the prequels was, he's just Luke but a little more edgy and with more dark aspects to him. I would have preferred for Anakin to be his own character, and I think he should have been more similar to Obi-Wan in that way. That's my opinion on the character of Anakin Skywalker.
I agree with that, just because he was trained by him, and he took on a lot of Obi-Wan's influence in general, right?
Yeah, and then Obi-Wan was trained by Qui-Gon, and then Qui-Gon was trained by Dooku, like the most elegant people on the Earth.
Right.
Again, in the Star Wars world.
Again, but it's 20 years different time from 3 to 4. And on top of the fact
I'm not saying you can't explain it away, but I don't know. I just think it's lame, personally. I would have preferred for Anakin to be more of his own character.
Well, he was his own character. He's one of the Dark Lords of the Sith, and he commits genocide and goes around hunting and killing, genocide style of killing.
Yeah, of course. Jedi. He is at that point, yes. But
he's
the way, like I said, I sound like a broken record. The way they portrayed him was like he was an edgier version of Luke who just made worse decisions than Luke. They had the same mannerisms.
Luke didn't have a love story, though. Luke was more searching for a way off of the rock he was stuck on, and he wanted to do what his friends did. He was just doing what a basic young man at his age would want to do. Anakin, his human emotions were getting the better of him, which he was also questioning the judgment of the Jedi, which Palpatine exploited to his advantage, allowing him to do the ultimate.
Again, I'm not talking about his character journey at all. I'm talking about his mannerisms and the way he was presented as a character in general.
And I would agree with what you say if you're looking at only the prequel movies. I feel like Clone Wars, the animated series, gave a lot of life to Anakin's character.
I don't know if it did give life to him. I won't deny you there, but even in the Clone Wars TV, I assume you're talking about the newer one now.
Not the Cartoon Network one, although that was amazing too.
Yeah,
that was really good.
It's also not canon anymore, right?
Anyway.
The Clone Wars animated series is way better canon. connection between 2 and 3.
I honestly like the other one more. I thought that was more tie-in just because they show you how all the Jedi are getting killed off, so they had to forcefully rush Anakin's training to make him a Jedi Knight.
That's another discussion
which
for
I like that.
another point, but like right now we're on Anakin Skywalker.
We still got one more season of Clone Wars to go.
Oh, I know.
Exactly.
I'm not disputing that. I always liked because they expanded more in the battle aspect and the depth of like the clone aspect, but in terms of like just the connection from 2 to 3 and the main pinnacle characters of the main saga story, I like that they realize, we're losing Jedi, we have to promote him, and they do it faster than they wanted to.
Yeah.
I like that kind of style.
Yeah.
That's the reason
I'll grant you that they did some things better with Anakin in the Clone Wars cartoon in terms of, them showing his darkness, and there was even one episode where he has to deal with slavers, and he's so emotional about it, like, Zygerian scum! Mm-hmm. And again, the way he says that, like, then I think about what happened in episode 1, I'm just like, damn, the tone does not match here. But anyway, like, even with that Anakin, yeah, I mean, he was a little more dark, he was a little more in control. I could believe at this point that this was the type of Jedi they would be surprised that he fell to the dark side, but he still had this certain
character.
What?
He was a more well-rounded
He was a more
character.
well-rounded character, but still, like, I would have, like I said, my idea for Anakin, I would have liked more elegance from him, and with the Clone Wars, they went even further in the direction of modernizing the language and making him speak like a normal young man. And even when they were auditioning people to be Anakin, they didn't tell people that it was an audition for Anakin. This is what they told people. They told people it was an audition for a character who was a hybrid between Luke Skywalker and Han Solo, which again, I don't think that was the correct direction to go for that character based on what I saw from him as Darth Vader.
Yeah.
In certain ways, yes. I say change in manners in character for Darth Vader is he's a Sith. He's been a Sith for the last 20 years. He's had Palpatine / Sidious as his master.
Extremely traumatized.
He's gone through losing all his limbs. He's more man than he is machine more than he is man. So, I don't know. I'm trying to put that in context and understanding. It's the same way...
Of course, you can make sense of it in your head, like, once...
But going back to where we stemmed from everything... You can't make sense from 7, 8, and 9.
No dispute there. No dispute there at all.
And that is where we are all at the point of flabbergasted of watching these films and trying to let us. Like, I'm all about escapism and fandom, appreciation. I think that's important for everyone, to expand their imagination and to appreciate art in any shape or form. These movies are, and I mean 7, 8, 9.
Yeah.
We just had a talk about Darth Vader, but in the lore sense. Sometimes we went to reserve ourselves to talk about George Lucas and his choices of what he did with characters, but it's still, we could go and we could discuss within the lore. Mm-hmm. When you were talking about 7, 8, 9, it is difficult to stay within the lore at all without jumping, because we know how much we know about creative differences, Colin Trevorrow walking away, Rian Johnson's choices, with Mark Hamill disagreeing with the character choices Rian Johnson wrote for Luke Skywalker, everything else we know from Force Awakens stuff that was changed or whatnot.
It is not the same lore.
And that's the...
No,
that's
not at all.
That is what I mainly wanted to... The main focus on was those 3 films was because you cannot stay within the lore without having to come back to reality, unfortunately. And that was my main heartbreak of watching this film in 2015, I thought, again, my intelligence was being insulted, and it was just being they just bought Star Wars, they packaged it, and they put it on the big screen. At certain points...
Well, in my defense, I think I was probably at emotional rock bottom by the end of 2017, and the only thing I had to cling on to at that point in my life was... Damn, they're gonna make some, really epic, convoluted plot out of The Last Jedi. It's gonna be reminiscent of Metal Gear Solid 2 or something like that, and let's think about all the things they can do, all the interesting things they can do to make sense of all the interesting things they made implications to in The Force Awakens. Let's see what the hell we can do with this. I'm intrigued, but then The Last Jedi comes out, and they do fucking nothing. Nothing. And then, at that point, I'm just thinking, well, okay, I've been taken back down to reality now. You spent about 2 hours and 30 minutes or so doing nothing. So how can you realistically make sense of all the mystery boxes you brought up in the film before that? You can't anymore.
Well,
and
why.
also, I don't care about these characters at this point. So, like, even a long ass film explaining everything that happened in The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi and tying it up in a perfect little bow, if that's even possible after The Last Jedi. Even if you did that, I still wouldn't care, because I do not care about these characters. I don't know anything about them. Like, the Rise of Skywalker, all the Rise of Skywalker was a poor attempt to justify the existence of the last two films.
Yeah, in some way, shape, or form. And at that point, I don't know why, but I enjoyed it. Maybe it's because it was a conclusion film, and conclusion films tend to get me more interested. That's why I love Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. I still love all of Lord of the Rings.
Well, that movie raised so many questions. I mean, the Rise of Skywalker, and there is nothing else coming up next, so I don't care anymore.
Yeah, I get it, and I think that sometimes is a J.J. Abrams
I have no
film.
reason to care. I have no reason to make theories anymore, because they're never going to explain it. I know that for sure. At least with The Force Awakens, they had at least 5 hours or so left to explain everything that had happened. So I still had hope at that moment. But so that's where I'm coming from with
And
The
I was
Force
in
Awakens.
2015 telling myself they ain't gonna explain nothing, and here I am in 2020, almost 5 years later, 4 years
good.
technically.
Good for you. You're right. My dreams are broken.
I was more, but again, I only went to my own closest friends to tell them. Like, I didn't go to social media. I didn't want to really go and argue with people I didn't know. I just wanted to discuss with friends of mine who knew where I was coming from, and I understand that.
I understood where you were coming from. Definitely, no doubt.
No, it's not even about you. It's just about how I was feeling at the time when I first saw The Force Awakens, and to have the discussions about where they taken. Because again, I think everyone who knows Star Wars and has seen the movies can say that they are a fan and they've enjoyed them. You cannot not enjoy them. It's just these films alone, I don't appreciate how Disney and whoever did creative with Kathleen Kennedy, they axed a lot of things, like the expanded universe and people who had worked, expanding on the universe itself.
Well, in regards
Star
to
Wars.
that, axing the expanded universe, I'm not gonna lie, I kind of it's not that they had to axe it.
They just didn't want to spend the time to read it and go through it. And it's not like it doesn't have to be canon.
But there is a lot of it that is inconsistent with each other, extended lore.
That's fine, but it's not that expanded universe. The whole reason it's called expanded universe is because it's a lot of people who came from fan groups that just created things. There's new story arcs. It's the same way there's always a new Marvel issue, yet Stan Lee has passed away. You can still create stories within that universe, and it doesn't detriment or contradict what we've seen episodes 1 through 6 right there. Those are the cinema films, and you can use those stories if you want, some that make sense that you can attach itself for 7, 8, 9, or
if they are worthy to incorporate into the canon.
And
exactly.
if you or by the way, I was going to say, because I thought maybe you might finish my sentence, you have the lore master with you to just continue those stories,
right,
which they decided to scrap, and that's where
I'm pretty sure even George Lucas probably would have ignored a lot of that expanded content.
I'm not disputing that. He did, probably, for better or for worse, but I also know that he did take advice, because a fan came to him with the idea of a concept of Anakin burning to become Darth Vader, which ended up becoming the battle on Mustafar with him and Obi-Wan. That was a fan concept that he applied with. It wasn't.
He does take ideas. Yeah, he's an open-minded man.
But a fan reached out. I can't remember. Someone's gonna have to. I don't know if I remember hearing that a fan reached out to him or someone came forward with this idea to him of that style. But that's fine. That's not like J.K. Rowling listening to a fan saying Hermione and Ron need to end up together, but she ended up listening to that fan, and here we are.
That was something J.K. Rowling wanted from the very beginning. That was a wish fulfillment on her part, and actually she regrets it. She has since come out and regretted it.
Because the early films all indicated that it was Ron and Hermione, but that's neither here or there. This is Star Wars, not Harry Potter.
Right.
If I had to ask you guys to sum up and categorize which out of the three each of the films, I already gave mine way earlier tonight because I just wanted to jump ahead and say it, and I put myself as Rise of Skywalker is the best one out of this trilogy, Last Jedi is second, and then Force Awakens is the worst, I say. You're more than free to share your thoughts. We'll go with Tommy first.
Okay. I know.
Try your best. I know, for whatever's sake. I just said it to begin with because I've seen enough and I remember enough from all three movies that I can make that decision, and I can confidently say I'm happy with my choices. So, by all means, you carry it away.
Very well. Well, here's the thing. I know you guys are gonna hate me for this.
There's nothing to hate. Enjoy it.
I'm probably... The only reason I can go with The Force Awakens is because, well, I'm probably never gonna watch it again, but here's the thing. If I do ever decide to watch it, I can pretend, if I'm, like, really, really high, I gotta take a lot of sativa before I watch it, and then I can watch the film.
Oh, shit, you know what I just realized?
What?
And, we didn't even talk about, for the botch, because there's so many things that were botched in this, that Phasma. Woo!
Oh,
Well,
yeah.
Anyway,
yeah,
let me
she
finish my
exists.
opinion first.
Yeah, go for it.
So, like, once I take a lot of sativa, then I can watch the film. I can pretend the other two films after it don't exist, and I can continue to, return to my happy thoughts of figuring out, whoa,
And
it's
just
so
enjoy
complex.
the pretty colors, man.
Maybe they're gonna make sense of all this, and then I'll go into my own head and start writing my own fan fictions of, like, how the fuck I'm gonna make sense of what I'm seeing here. I mean, I would love to have an in-depth discussion at some point where you guys, ask me questions, say, Tommy, this happened here. Make sense of this. And then I'd love to think about, okay, let's think about how to make sense of that. But you see, I can't do that. I can't do that with The Last Jedi and The Rise of Skywalker because, well, there's nothing happening after them. And, like, The Rise of Skywalker has already, it directly it contradicted what directly happened right before that film. I know you say there's a lot of contradictions in The Force Awakens as well, and feel free to question me on those. Like, a lot of what you've said already,
again,
I agree with.
Listen,
but
don't worry about it. If you want to choose Force Awakens as your first, that's totally fine. I'm only going to say for my own sake, and this isn't to pass on judgment on anyone who likes it, unless you're going to try to be some terribly... Oh my god, you're catering to some type of fan base and you're pandering and you're some quote-unquote white knight and you're going to put these movies ahead of 1 through 6. But
no,
regardless,
definitely
No,
not.
this isn't you. This is you. This is just I'm saying this out loud for anyone else who might assume this. The reason why I had issue with The Force Awakens is because I left the theater with so many unanswered questions and confusion.
I guess that's one of the reasons why I liked it. I like figuring things out.
No. I like it when it gives me optimistic questions. Not where it's like I said earlier before, I felt like my intelligence was being insulted. But that's neither here nor there. If that's cool. When I watched, and it's the same. I told you when we left the theater, you and I, to watch after watching The Rise of Skywalker, I felt the same way I told you back how I did in 2015. And I said the irony is it's a J.J. Abrams film again. But I had a lot of unanswered questions, but I wasn't as angry watching the movie because I guess it was a conclusion movie and it wrapped the story up for whatever sake it was. However rushed it was, I'm not here to say I felt emotions here for certain characters, but that's why I was okay with watching the film and not as angry as I was with unanswered questions and on optimism I didn't have for Force Awakens.
I felt nothing watching Rise of Skywalker. Absolutely nothing. I think probably I felt the way watching Rise of Skywalker that you felt watching The Last Jedi, I suspect.
See, I enjoyed The Last Jedi, though. And a lot of people didn't. And the only reason why I said the thing that saved me for watching this is because if they didn't have a strong character like Oscar Isaac play Poe on screen more, I think that movie would have been tremendously a lot worse. I enjoy Oscar Isaac as an actor, and I liked him as Poe, and because we got more screen time with him, it's probably why. If he was more predominantly seen...
Still haven't had the Luke Skywalker discussion yet, though.
That's always still an option. But yeah, that's the only reason why I ever brought up my Force Awakens as last on the list.
I could probably spend days or hours telling you the convoluted theories I've heard and have come up with myself.
I believe you could. But yeah, no, if that's the case, yeah, sure. So Force Awakens would be your first?
I guess so. Probably Force Awakens, and then Last Jedi, and then Rise of Skywalker. I mean, because Last Jedi, even though it ignored everything that happened in...
Because my style of my way I categorize this is best to worst out of these three, from 7 to 9. So that's how you're categorizing it. Tongue-tied. Force Awakens is number 1 for you. Worst one is Rise of Skywalker then? And Jedi's in the middle?
Yeah, I think so. But if I'm going by... I mean, I'm not a filmmaking professional or anything, but if I'm just putting objective film goggles on and I'm thinking of the films with, I'm thinking of each film as an individual film, not connected to anything whatsoever, I would probably have to go with The Last Jedi as being the best.
Best looking. Would you say for looks-wise, it's best to you?
I don't know about looks. I mean, I think a lot of the performances were great. I mean, I loved Mark Hamill's performance in that film. Even though they fucked up Luke's characters in a lot of moments, I still think he did a phenomenal job performing in that role, and it frankly makes me mourn for his career, the career he could have had, everybody didn't pigeonhole him as Luke Skywalker all the time. I mean, he had a fine theater career, though, and a fine voice acting career. I just wish he would have been in more films, because he's got chops.
I think
he really does.
I think there's still potential for him to
definitely.
To be
and I hope people take advantage of that potential. Also, I guess, the stuff that happened in the only reason why I might go The Last Jedi if I'm taking it, without the context of the other films is... Well, actually, I don't know if I even can. Because this is what I always said about The Last Jedi. To me, it looks like a poor man's KOTOR 2 that was much more expensive, ironically.
Kinda.
You know about KOTOR 2?
Yeah.
Because honestly, great. KOTOR 2, in my humble opinion, is my favorite story to ever come out of Star Wars.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so then we'll say for your best out of this trilogy then is Last Jedi. Who's number 2?
I can't. Here's the thing about this trilogy. I cannot look at... It's kind of like the way I talk to you about how Qui-Gon Jinn thinks of the Force. He doesn't think of the Force in terms of dark side and light side. He's like just following the will of the Force.
Tommy, I need an answer, though.
I can't give you an answer because like Qui-Gon Jinn doesn't think of the Force in terms of light side and dark side. I cannot think of these 3 films in terms of worst and best because it's too messy.
I'm getting your sense you're a casualty of this this trilogy here.
What?
Like I thought my insanity was gone.
No, it does make me go insane, Roberto. It really does. It does because I keep saying no, guys, I really could see something interesting happening after Force Awakens, even though I know there's a bunch of things that don't make sense in it, and then everybody calls me an idiot for anyway.
How about this? I will let you gather your thoughts in a few moments. Take a simmer for a sec.
Okay.
We'll go with David's choices, and then we'll come back to you. How about that?
I don't know if you should come back to me, Roberto.
Some people might hesitate me or be angry that I might, but I'm gonna put that aside and say I'm gonna give you just some time to just check it, and then we'll go with David. David, what do you think?
So I think it's a steady decline. Force Awakens was the best, and Rise of Skywalker was the worst. But this is all cream of the crumb. Okay, like for me, knowing that if they have removed the lore master, that any of the next sequels wouldn't be consistent with the original timeline, knowing that there's all these novels of what happens after Return of the Jedi not being used, all of this writing being scrapped for something of an original idea, quote unquote, I just already knew that it was not going to be the same. I already knew it was going to be an inferior product just because it was so inconsistent. Mm-hmm. So at this point, I'm already tapped out on the story. Okay, so what I'm qualitating. Is that a word? Yeah. What I'm qualifying these.
There you go.
There we go. These 3 movies on. It's based on how many story beats, like just individual story beats, not even the overall story. How many story beats are just pure nonsense, and then as a stunt guy, I'm looking at how's the action. Okay, right. Because a lot of kids are going to see this, and a lot of kids are not even going to understand the story to begin with. A lot of adults don't anyway. So. You have to qualify the action as well.
Right.
I think that the how would I say it? The lightsaber choreography was okay, but story-wise made no sense, right? Like I said before, Kylo should have killed Rey instantly. Mm-hmm. No question. I would call it the firearms combat, right? All the blaster combat. Actually was more realistic than not so much in the prequels, but in the original 3. The original trilogy, the blaster combat was very unrealistic. Everybody should have gotten shot multiple times, just because they're not using cover to their advantage. You see multiple shots in the original trilogy where actors are putting their whole entire body out just to fill the camera frame. And open fire, right? It's great for posters. It's great for all that.
I suppose, but in sci-fi films, blaster bolts fly really, really slow as compared to bullets in the real world. Actually, regular guns in our world are more effective than the guns in the... Anyway, that's
absolutely
another topic.
Absolutely are. But and then finally, the space flight combat. It becomes increasingly more of a clusterfuck between each trilogy. Mm-hmm. So the original trilogy. It was more focused on the actors in the cockpits rather than the actual combat itself. So they made all of the flight combat very simple, right? Simplistic. Vader's on your tail, Vader's shooting off different parts of the squadron, and it's more of the actors reacting to that. In the prequel trilogy, it's a lot, it becomes... that's where it really turns into a clusterfuck off the top, where you're dealing with Phantom Menace, where Anakin is in that
Naboo starfighter.
That Naboo starfighter, and they're the Naboo. What would you call it? Air Force or Space Force in this case. They're stronger than anything they had on the ground.
Yeah.
It's as if Naboo put 90% of their military budget into spaceflight, and then just kept the ground troops to a minimum. It was weird there, but whatever. And they were fighting droids, which droids mean having a machine army entails that you're going to have many machines, right? A mass production. Mm-hmm. And then toward Revenge of the Sith, it's a massive clusterfuck. Even in the top of the movie, where you have multiple Republic cruisers, right?
And Star Destroyers,
the precursor to Star Destroyers, flying, overlapping each other, with also battle cruisers from the Federation Army, mm-hmm. overlapping each other, and then you just have so many starships flying at each other. Amazing feat of CGI, but it's a clusterfuck and you can't follow it. And then in the Disney sequel trilogy, all the starfighter combat is insane in terms of just so many ships on screen at once. You can't follow what's happening, and in that chaos they're able to just simplistically drive their story beats along. So stunt wise, there's pros and cons to each trilogy, but overall story wise, like how I feel about stunts is you need the story to still justify what is happening on screen. Uh-huh. You can have an epic fight, but if there's no story sense behind it, it might as well just be a fan-made video. It can't be canon. So what I would suggest to be my final thoughts about this trilogy, it is forgettable, which is thankfully forgettable, and we cannot see it as canon. We can't possibly see it as a canon continuation. There's too many inconsistencies, and the lore master's not present for the writing of these trilogy. So when the lore master's not present, and there's already inconsistencies, fans can't band together and agree this is canon. Disney will say it's canon for some time, and then eventually it'll fade
Disney
into...
will say it's canon because they own everything of it.
Because they own the rights, right? But canon is defined by the lore master and by the fans, right? Fans will decide this can't be canon because there's too many inconsistencies. And eventually Disney, well, it's not like Disney's going to fight to say, no, this is canon no matter what you say. They're not going to fight that. They're making their merchandise sales. That's all they cared about. This trilogy, in my opinion, was pander for merchandising sales. And that's why you never could connect to any of the characters. All you could see are the visual of the characters, because the visual was what mattered to create action figures, or posters, or video games, or what have you.
Well, actually, even then, the video games were subpar. But that's just me for now, because at least when I was enjoying the prequel era, the video games were...
some of them were decent.
From the 90s with some of the Jedi Outcast series, Jedi Knight series, and then eventually when...
Jedi Knight series, I think that was the best representation of lightsaber combat there has ever been.
And that's what I'm trying to say. When
game.
the Phantom Menace came out, it put the surge into more gaming, and then, Attack of the Clones come out, and then Revenge of the Sith, and that era of, the original Battlefronts and a lot of the other KOTORs came out and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of that fun to enjoy video games. This era, it's questionable with the video game series.
I've heard a lot of... I haven't played it, but I've heard a lot of really, really good things about Jedi Fallen Order. People who hate this trilogy, this sequel trilogy, love that game.
Yeah,
and its
I haven't
story.
played it yet. I'm kind of interested, but you're saying?
One more thing that I would add on to my final thoughts on this sequel trilogy. It could have worked if they had set it 3,000 or however many thousand years into the future, and then just maybe referenced any of the original 6 in Easter eggs, in dialogue, or maybe some symbolic, maybe Vader's mask appears after thousands of years, right? Like, that would be something, little Easter eggs referencing the original 6, but you'd write your own original story. You write your own original characters, and it doesn't continue off of a piece of lore where the lore master is not present. It's like KOTOR. KOTOR worked really well because it was set how many thousands of years back, right? In the Old Republic, Knights of the Old Republic.
Right.
The story was completely original, but still set in Star Wars lore and Star Wars setting. But the lore master didn't have to be present for KOTOR just because it was its own original story.
I think that's very true.
I know. Referring to me now. I have collected my thoughts.
All right, make it quick.
Make it quick. Okay. Well, I'm after deliberation, I'm gonna have to go with The Force Awakens just because I could see a potentially somewhat decent story
of optimism coming out of it.
And also, I can do some mental gymnastics in my head with that film to think about what they may do with the next 2 films after that. But I kind of want to expand on something that our friend David here just said in terms of how you would do a sequel trilogy. I mean, like I said, part of the reason why
Actually, can you keep that thought
for
a sec? Can you tell me your other 2 choices and then go into that?
My other 2 choices,
just in order, so that way it would make sense of how you. If you're going to say if you're going to bring up a topic of how you would do a sequel trilogy, then at least then it coincides with you just gave us your 3 in order, and then you can spin into that. Just so that way at least we have it. So
just the names, if you will. So like Force Awakens number 1.
So now you have to decide between The Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker as your number 2.
It's like asking me, would I rather shoot Bin Laden or shoot Hitler if I was in a room with them?
And if you had both bullets,
it's still cream of the crop.
And if you had 2 bullets, let me guess, you'd probably shoot both in the sky, wouldn't you jerk?
Now, I'm feeling, based on what Tommy has said before, I feel like you would just put Last Jedi middle and then Rise of Skywalker at the end, right?
So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
Because at least The Last Jedi was a plot, whereas with The Rise of Skywalker, it just seemed like a copy and pasted together mess of ideas and implications here and there.
Yeah,
I don't love one way more than I love the other.
Right.
But at least with The Last Jedi, I was somewhat invested until that very strange ending, which we didn't speak about that ending.
Well,
there were a lot of things that didn't make sense in that film.
For everyone who's still sticking with us, I appreciate that. I guess for the sake of, there's just so many things to break apart in The Last Jedi, in The Rise of Skywalker, and in The Force Awakens. There's too many. They made it way too easy, unfortunately. One of the things is why I even brought this guy out, and I know I'm going to kind of probably go a little bit off topic, but for those of you who are listening right now, I'm having in my hand the Black Series version of the Sith Trooper, the ever-ending Final Order Sith Trooper, who was advertised how their helmet was slightly different from the new original First Order Stormtrooper's helmet, because now it has a slit in the middle to connect the bottom part to the top part, right? And these guys were as useless as my sock is in a rainstorm. My God, they advertised them in the posters, and when they came on camera and on screen, they I don't know, maybe they were minorly accurate, but they killed a bunch of extras for the Resistance. And
you could say the exact same thing about the Knights of Ren too.
Well, the Knights of Ren, I was laughing because when I watched it in theaters, and they had a cool shot. They're on top of that big boulder in the sand.
Neat shot. Doesn't do anything,
and it's in like a 360 kind of rotation. I yelled out in the theater, "These guys aren't Nazgul!" Because I started laughing because they made it seem like they were trying to treat these guys are like hunting for Rey, like she's the One Ring or some shit, and like Kylo Ren's like Sauron trying to send them after.
That's something I still don't know. I don't know what the hell a Ren is. What does Ren refer to? And what does Kylo refer to, for that matter?
Which is what, for that saying goes when Snoke goes, leader of the Knights of Ren. I thought everyone was going to be something Ren. Like, you got Kylo Ren, you got so-and-so Ren. And I was thinking, at least my own optimism, for with that little flashback sequence in The Force Awakens, I thought eventually Finn, for whatever his dumb character arc that I didn't like in Force Awakens, I thought him, Rey, I don't know who else, some other people would train as Jedi from Luke when they'd find him. They would take on the Knights of Ren. You'd have Kylo Ren plus 7 other Knights of Ren, all the red lightsabers, Rey with blue, maybe Finn with blue, and other people with other color, and it'd be a massive clash. I thought maybe that would be the ultimate, pinnacle, clash in the third movie.
An epic lightsaber group fight.
Yes, in this new future era after the events of 4, 5, and 6, with the modern tech of this era of filmmaking and so on and so forth. Yeah. That JJ, like I just read the quote not too long ago, he could still provide that elegance and, that roughness, but maybe even splice in a little bit of the prequel style of fights and whatnot. But anyways, no way, shape, or form. Yeah, there was ridiculous thick amounts of plot armor in The Rise of Skywalker. Like, ridiculous. Can
I name one that's like specific that we've not talked about?
Sure.
It's a small detail. That's why we haven't talked about it, because there's so many small details that are blatant nonsense, like I've said before. Why was Endor flooded? Right?
If that is, we don't know.
Was it Endor?
We don't know if we're led to believe it's Endor. The only problem is, on top of that, and I was seeing a reviewer, which makes complete sense, that dagger that she ends up pulling out, the ruler attachment that she has to hold it, that piece of whatever rubble, if it's in the ocean of that planet, and how long it's ever been there, 30 plus years, I'm led to believe the ocean currents would eventually erode it and it would shift. So you have to be at the right place. And how do you know where to stand to find that point?
It's impossible.
Oh yeah,
it was total.
It's
total
not like Indiana
whatever.
Jones where he gets the staff and he puts it in, and then at the right time of day because the sunlight shines that you can that works.
That sort of works, even though it's very specific. But this is something where it's like generations have passed. And yet, like you said, the landmass would change by then. But no, beyond that, the reason why I ask why is Endor flooded is because even if it's not Endor, it doesn't matter. Why is at the Emperor's throne that was in space now on that planet? It's fine. It fell out of the sky. Yeah, whatever. Now, what we're getting into with plot armor and Rey being so OP, she grew up on Tatooine, correct?
No, Jakku. Tatooine 2.0 or something.
Right, another desert planet, correct?
And then we had a third desert planet given to us.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that one.
Festival of the Ancestors.
Right. So she grew up on a desert planet and then was exiled to another desert planet where she had to survive on her own. So she only knows desert and sand, no water. How did she know how to operate that skiff getting to the Emperor's throne in the middle of torrential waters that were too dangerous for the ex-troopers that were pretty well locals of that planet side when the group meets them? The locals said these waters are too dangerous for us to operate the skiffs that we have probably built ourselves and that we are experts in.
Oh yeah.
Desert Dweller is not manually taking that skiff across the ocean solo. And they might have been able to get over it by having her, floating and meditating and having the Force operate the skiff for her. But they didn't. They had her manually doing it. She has no training, no knowledge of navigating water, let alone that specific skiff. She's had no training in that.
Well, if you
she's a Palpatine.
She's always leaving them too. She's ditching them. She goes out and walks out into the sand to wait for Kylo to show up, who crashes horrifically but somehow walks out unscathed.
Right, that's one of the reasons I frankly would not have been surprised if they decided to go the the gay route with Finn and Poe, because it seemed like, oh, Rey's the new Luke, so I guess I'm not saying I would have liked it. I'm just saying I would have been surprised given what they were doing.
No, there's nothing wrong with that at all. It seemed like...
No, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with having a gay couple. I'm just saying there's wrong with having two characters suddenly be gay when there was no indication that they were gay before.
No, I'm expanding on what you said in that sense, that if it did happen, it almost felt like it would be forced. Some people say that there was preludes and hinted in Force Awakens, but I felt that it was just two people who cared enough for each other in that sense, two good friends who were looking out for each other, and that doesn't need to have romance.
I know people have such a... People seem to have a problem with men showing affection towards each other. I mean, this is another talk. I get really annoyed when people comment about, oh, Sam and Frodo are really gay, because I remember watching those films as a young boy thinking, man, I really wish I had a friendship like this. This seems like the perfect friendship.
I think some people are just, they're looking for proper representation, and I don't mind that if it's naturally scripted organically as opposed to just being a plug, which I felt in certain cases in this movie series there were plugs.
Oh, definitely. No doubt about
Pandarus plugs.
Yeah. And, I don't know, I just kind of wanted it to be gracefully natural. Again, this guy, you're going to have a stormtrooper who just, is conveniently knows all the all the high tech and all the First Order conveniently. I remember that was one, and that's the one thing I left the theater for Rise of Skywalker. Remember I said the rise of how convenient?
Yeah, I remember.
I was like, Star Wars, the rise of how convenient, because there were a lot of convenient situations that happened in the Rise of Skywalker.
And then if you
Chewie didn't die.
Yes, he did not.
Fuck you. It caused a journey, and it also caused a plot element for Rey to turn a little bit dark side because she was mad that her good friend Chewie died.
Right.
And they didn't show a second carrier cruiser, a second transport ship, none of that. There was no other indication that Chewie would have survived that lightning strike to there.
Well,
no, there was not a second transport.
No, you know what?
At least I'll give them credit for this.
Second.
I mean, at least they didn't make us think he was dead for more than 5 seconds. I mean, I would have been more pissed off if he was revealed to be alive, about an hour later.
You know why, David? They did do it when they first land. There's two transports,
but not one taking off.
But Finn points to saying that's the one that's got Chewie,
and Finn must have been watching it.
Yeah.
Right? He must have been, he saw Chewie get on that one. That's the only
difference is, it's like they did show it, so they're going to try to escape that question mark of people criticizing that, but the main characters who are supposed to drive the story drive you to believe that that's the one. Mm-hmm. And then they just try to put that cheap dangle that cheap bait in your face.
And then they 180 it immediately in the next scene.
Right.
And it's just, there is no point to this.
Which was funny because then...
it was a pointless death twist.
I'm the spy. Which is, I knew it! To my fucking Hux. And then I laughed real hard.
Even the look on Hux's face when he said that made me laugh, made me piss my pants out of laughter, because I was just he just kind of had this look like even the actor thought this was stupid. Yeah. He almost didn't want to say it. Really, you're gonna make me say this?
I thought he had a smirk on his face, like it was supposed to be a botched take, and that's what it was. He just did it on purpose. I'm the spy. This is.
I don't know. I think he you know what he kind of looked like in that scene? Have any of you ever seen that video of the dramatic hamster?
I don't.
Yeah.
That's what Hux looked like. That's the expression on his face.
A little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Dramatic hamster. That's a throwback.
But yeah, evidently that was something that had played out. And then when they do Hux 2.0, or Robert E. Grant's character comes in and then he blasts him, I actually physically clapped in the theater when that happened. Yeah. Because I was just like, they he's been kind of annoying for the last couple of films, but not annoying in a good way. Where you're kind of like, oh, I can't wait till he gets this comeuppance. It was kind of more just like, oh, thank God, get rid of this guy. He's just kind of annoying me.
In The Force Awakens, they were kind of establishing this sort of power struggle dynamic between him and Kylo Ren, which
Snoke's approval.
Which they never expanded on really in the Last Jedi, and so by that point they broke his character, and they didn't know how to repair him, so they just had to throw him away and replace him.
Yeah, I guess at that point, but I mean, if you're gonna look at it as a whole, you're both gonna say that 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and I'm doing 3, 2, 1.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
If that's what we're gonna agree upon.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3,
I
1,
think
2.
so.
Okay, fair enough.
789, 789, 987 for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think it's also because all the cast gets, I mean, for whatever it is, cheesy or corny to say, I think the majority of the cast is together the whole time, which is a little bit more enjoyable, because the way the end of the first Lord of the Rings happens and characters have their own arcs leading into the next two films, right? You get that at the beginning of Last Jedi, and they're reunited right at the very end of Last Jedi, but Finn and Rose are doing their own thing. Poe's dealing with the stuff on the ship, and like I said earlier tonight in this show, that Rey is stuck on with Luke there, the crabby Luke who doesn't want to do anything anymore and wants to just go and die. And
what I think would have been an interesting direction to go with? I told you this, Roberto, but I think you might appreciate this a little more since you know about KOTOR 2. You know what I thought they might have did? I thought they might have taken a Darth Treya-esque direction with Luke. I thought maybe he was gonna realize, oh shit, all the Force does, it's just conflict is just gonna keep on happening over and over again, just in this futile battle for balance. I thought, because when Mark Hamill was saying, this isn't gonna be the character you thought it was before, I was thinking, because I was optimistic, they might be going in that direction with Luke.
Right.
I mean, the way they do it in The Force Awakens, it seems to me like he was going to that planet for a specific reason, and he had something specific he wanted to do. Why would you leave a map behind in that case if you're just why do you think I came to the most unfindable galaxy place in the galaxy? I just wanted to die here. Why'd you leave a map behind then? What was the point of that?
Yeah, clearly not.
I don't know, but like I said, I think it would have been a little bit more comfortable to see him witness Han die, be traumatized because Han got killed by his son, which is Luke's nephew, who he trained.
Yeah.
And he blames himself for everything that happened at the academy, and so far everything that's happened after that it would have been a more story arc since to him to flee to the island, have that heart or mindset, and then Rey convinces him to come back fight, and he's there to train and continue training people.
Like I said, I think the only reason to do a sequel trilogy to cap off Skywalker trilogy and continue their story after Return of the Jedi, like I said before, is to expand upon the concept of balance of the Force, and by taking the approach having Luke, there's this want to kill the Force because he realizes it's just gonna keep on wanting to balance itself. I think that would have been I would have been okay with the Star Wars franchise ending that way. Ending with the annihilation of the Force. And then you don't need to do anything else after that. I think that would have been an interesting and definitive, and if you could find a, coherent way to, and a dramatic way to perform that plot.
Mm-hmm. Right. I mean, if this is any allude to what we've discussed here today, it's also noted that I hear rumors that Lucas is interested in coming back to do work. I know he's been on set for The Mandalorian to do stuff with, just be there with Jon Favreau while they're working on that series. But I also was hearing rumors that he was really intrigued because, again, he's not like us and thousands and millions of others. He's also not really been satisfied with the direction that they've gone with the franchise, so he kind of wanted to get back into working with creative. But I also heard that, and there might be still speculation, rumor that if he were to come back, I think he wants complete creative control. I don't know how you do that, seeing as how he sold it away, and it's like you want creative control. But how do you give? If you're Bob Iger, I don't know how you give it back creative control to him when you bought it from him. Which is interesting to hear. That'd be kind of good.
Even if Disney were to employ him to be in creative control, but he's employed by Disney, Disney's going to try to enforce their own marketing agenda,
right,
to try to impact the lore master. Which, if Lucas is really true to his integrity, he's not going to bend to that, and then they would just drop him again.
Yeah. I mean, we've probably torn these trilogies
asunder.
Up. Yeah. I mean, I still love 1 through 6. Things I liked in 7, 8, 9.
The performances. The actors' performances were fantastic.
Well,
for what they were given.
I never had any issue with 1 through 6 and 7, 8, 9. Performances was never an issue for me. I think everyone did a great job.
And I also like.
I'm trying to talk about like cool things in terms of like the lore of it. Like if I'm saying, I loved Anakin and Obi-Wan, their fight, that was cool, or the space battle, above Coruscant, or if I'm going to even go as far back as the Attack of the Clones, I love the Battle of Geonosis, that whole when the clones first arrive in the gunships and pick them up. That's so cool. Those are those films, or even the whole fight scene between Luke and Darth Vader in Empire Strikes Back, or the Battle of Hoth. Those are those movies that those cool moments. Cool moments in 7, 8, 9. One of my favorite shots is in Force Awakens, was that one continuous shot, or at least it feels like it's a continuous shot, where it's following Finn on the plane there outside of Baz's temple, and it's Poe's X-Wing that's shooting TIE fighters out of the sky, and it's that rotating shot. That was one consistent cool, I mean, it felt like it was a consistent shot. Obviously there's editing and special effects involved, but it's really cool. I like that. I thought that was kind of cool, apart from the battle sequence there, that the Resistance, when they show up to help.
I think my favorite part in all of the sequel trilogy was ironically it was in The Last Jedi. It was it's the part when Rey is starting to train, and she's going like, I don't feel. She's closing her eyes and going, I don't feel the Force, and then like Luke is just like
that J.J. Abrams, Rian Johnston joke.
And then he says like, you feel that? Oh, I feel it. That's the Force, and he slaps her. That was
just a feather.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Another cool.
Mark
moment.
Hamill was completely himself there, and it was glorious.
Another cool moment that I liked in this was in The Rise of Skywalker, was when Palpatine gets his yellow eyes again. That was really cool. I kind of like that look. That was really fun to see. I was really hoping for some more crazy, spectacular space battle because of that ridiculous fleet that was just sitting there with all those planet-killing guns and everything else that was the crazy crap. And
they had planet-killing guns. I forgot about that. Actually, you know what's weird? After first watching this film, I forgot about a lot of things that happened.
Well, you were saying, we watched it recently again, Tommy and myself, and you were kept on saying that if you blink, you miss stuff.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. I blink. At one point after we watched the film the first time, Roberto and his we were referring at one point when Kylo Ren died, and I was just like, oh yeah, that's right, Kylo Ren died. I completely forgot that he died.
Yeah, that's one of those moments that I was like, you kind of, there's a lot to take in, and like, I mean, we scratched certain points of Rise of Skywalker, but
miss like 5 years of content.
Well, I mean, they destroyed the planet that Poe has to go back, and we find out he's a spice runner with that girl that has that one First Order coin to get him.
Oh yeah, and they added more characters, even though we don't know anything about the characters we already have.
Yeah, but yeah, there's that one Star Destroyer that has the planet-killing gun that was out there. So unless the
one that was out there, and then I knew the whole fleet had them equipped as well. They mentioned.
Yeah, no, the whole fleet had them,
had one.
But yeah,
each.
That whole fleet had them,
but they were all just sitting on Exegol for no reason.
Yeah, waiting.
Also, real quick, because there's so many blatant nonsensical plot points here.
Of course,
that whole fleet, if it's hovering inside the atmosphere of Exegol, that atmosphere should have torrential winds. Nothing organic on there should be surviving, because how many Star Destroyers' thrusters are being engaged right now to keep those masses of metal floating in the sky? It would be pushing all the atmosphere in crazy weather patterns that planet would have never seen before. Makes no sense.
No,
You know?
a lot of things don't.
Physics are not my strong
Why
suit,
does
so,
Sidious? Why can Sidious wipe out the entire fleet with his Force lightning, but then not vaporize Rey while she's holding a lightsaber in front of her?
Because that was the cheap plug that they did. That was and Tommy
Speaking
here.
of which-
Tommy's never seen the Endgame finish, but they basically shot for shot did Iron Man with Thanos with Palpatine and Rey.
Pretty much, yeah. Like there's that's the thing. We can keep going on about terrible, just terrible like nonsensical plot points that happened, and I really can't think of moments in the lore of the new movies that I enjoyed because they always get undercut right immediately after the next scene.
People were also saying that the
Exactly.
film, The Rise of Skywalker, was a huge nostalgia trip. They did like the whole, well, now the Force Ghost can lift the X-Wing, and they wanted to reincorporate that same scene from Empire Strikes Back that Yoda does for Luke to lift his X-Wing outside of the swamp. And, you know, I mean, that was, for me, a pretty cool moment in the original trilogy. When they did it in this one, it was like, oh, okay, similar, cool.
But you know, it's just a callback. It's not.
Yeah, and I think it was the same way that I was really
Yeah.
mad with the.
Speaking of callbacks in that film, I don't remember exactly word for word, but if you look at that opening crawl of Rise of Skywalker, it's like they had at least one line from each film just within that crawl. That's all that crawl was.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even remember what the lines were, but I know they were all in reference to pretty much every other film. You remember any of the lines? Because I don't remember them, but I just remember thinking, oh, they're just saying every line from the entire saga up until this point.
Yeah, no, I don't remember any of those lines just because it was, again, it was something that was super fast paced, super long film times, so many plot beats, or so many story beats, and then so much nonsense. And because of it, because of the jumbled chaos of writing that these three movies were, it's hard to remember any specific moments in them. The only things I can remember are the mistakes that I can remember. I'm not usually one to complain, just in general, about life in general. This universe is amazing that we live in.
Right.
And then beyond that, I'm not one to complain about movies or high-budget film just because there's always good and bad traits to it. It's just that in this trilogy of movies, there's so much writing that's just nonsensical, where it's like you cannot find the redeeming qualities because it is such a chaos clusterfuck of writing in general, and then mostly poor writing.
You know, Frank and myself Frankie D, I should say, we're really big wrestling fans. Mainly of WWE, but obviously a lot of other things. And WWE is going sometimes through issues where they have like a ridiculous amount of writers for their shows and a huge amount of creative, but it still all goes through Vince McMahon, who makes a ridiculous amount of tweaks. When you look at the three movies from 7, 8, 9, they don't have too many writers. They have either JJ or Ryan Johnson, who wrote their respective movies for 7 and 8, and then JJ had the other gentleman. I don't want to say his name because I don't want to botch it, but it was the gentleman who wrote also Superman, Batman vs. Superman, Dawn of Justice. It's a very small writing crew, very small writing team. I don't know how big the creative is for brainstorming the stories before writing a full script. It also showed that Colin Trevorrow got a credit for Rise of Skywalker. I guess they must have used whatever he originally wanted to do way back in the day before he eventually walked away and they either fired him or they both mutually agreed to part ways.
Did you see the leaked plot of Colin Trevorrow? I don't know if
I
it's real
did
or
see
not,
some
but...
parts of it. Yeah, I mean, I saw this leak months ago too. Also, the original for Rise of Skywalker content. I still remember that leak, and it's identical to what I saw in the film. So, I'm like, the leaks were true for this particular film.
Right.
But I guess what I'm saying is, why I'm tying into the whole wrestling part of it is that with Vince McMahon, it became Kathleen Kennedy. In the sense that whatever groups were coming in with creative stories and ideas, she was also coming in with her either red pen to either cross out certain things or make adjustments here and discuss about what they wanted going forward. And I think at certain cases, you kind of... I mean, my main issue when I first started back in 2015 about being angry with The Force Awakens was the fact that they were having multiple directors direct this trilogy. And I'm like, why not just keep the same guy the whole time? And that was before when it was supposed to be for sure Colin Trevorrow before he walked away. And I was like, this is a baton race that you shouldn't be doing.
I don't think, I think the issue was multiple writers for each film, not necessarily
Well, then
directors.
again, at least if you have the same director, he can coincide the whole story through and see it to the end. As opposed to a guy coming in for one and then you got to come in for another one. It don't make it a revolving door for a trilogy.
Right.
Never a good idea.
If the continuation of the saga is not going to be consistent, at least the trilogy itself should be consistent.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's
agree.
why I'm also going to tie back into the MCU, because this is Disney and they did a great... Marvel Studios had a plan set, and obviously Kevin Feige was in charge of that, and Kathleen Kennedy is Kevin Feige of obviously the Lucasfilm, who is behind everything. So you thought also by Bob Iger and those guys they had, everything was set in stone and Kathleen was fine, but it just seemed like, and that's why I'm saying 22 films for the Infinity Saga, for the MCU, for all the superhero movies. They did a pretty decent job. Nothing where there was complete outcry by the fans of they did something ridiculously, that botched previous films and going to be botching future films. So to see that happen with just 3 films alone, everyone liked Rogue One. I didn't hear anyone argue a Rogue One.
It was amazing.
I don't know why. Why is that though? I don't get it. Why? And that's a rhetorical question, but I think it's just because it's a solo movie. No pun intended to the Solo film about Han Solo. But I just mean it's its own movie about events that surround the events of 4, 5, and 6, and post 1, 2, and 3, that don't contradict things that we've seen, that don't alter the future we already know exists. It's just about, side stories that were mentioned about how the sacrifice of people going to get the Death Star plans, and this is a story.
Yeah.
That movie actually went through a lot of adjustments too. But you were going to say?
All of that is totally undercut when the Empire or the First Order had access to 2 other superweapons literally beyond the Death Star.
That's
More
true.
dangerous than the Death Star. It totally undercut Rogue One.
Yeah,
It makes it have less impact.
I think so too, and I was telling a few people, the director of Rogue One had some comments about, because again, when Force Awakens came out, everyone was on a high. I was probably one of 5 people out of the entire planet who was like, I didn't like this movie.
I wasn't on a high.
I'm teasing.
If there are 5 people, 3 of them are here right now.
No, he was one of the millions, but it wasn't until after Last Jedi.
Here's the thing. I was.
But you enjoy a movie for the theories of what could happen.
Like I said,
Just
I
like
enjoyed
enjoy
the
the
film.
movie as a stunt guy, right?
Right,
We
right.
all enjoy movies for different reasons.
I
So-
wasn't going, oh my god, this is the greatest film ever. It got me intrigued for where they could possibly go with all these convoluted plot elements
Yes.
that they are adding into it. I was genuinely intrigued, but after The Last Jedi explained basically nothing, and I just had nothing to look forward to.
So going back to Rogue One, the director said a quote basically about, and it was similar to what Lucas commented about the prequels, about he didn't want to make anything retro. He wanted to make something new, and it was also when the director of Rogue One, he wasn't taking a shot at, I want to say it at Force Awakens, but you can tell that he was not trying to pander to the fandom, but he also wasn't going to try to do anything that was going to unjustify Star Wars. The Force was still the Force. In Rogue One, they believed in it, but it was now about how the Empire.
I did like Rogue One a lot better than The Force Awakens, though. I think
Rogue One, if we're gonna go, obviously we're just talking trilogy films of 7, 8, 9, but Rogue One, I'm gonna throw it in the pile with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, because it felt great to watch. Didn't ruin anything, and it had a lot of side characters that we saw in 4, 5, and 6 reappear, if that makes any sense.
It connects
Right.
beautifully.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It works perfectly.
No doubt there.
And it was, like I said, it was very nice to watch that era of Star Wars be represented on film with the advancements in film technology that we have now that they didn't have in 77, 80, and 83. Which is great to enjoy on the big screen. I had a great time watching the movie.
Well, like I said again, after The Force Awakens, basically I had no opinion. I was gonna.
If you want to even be more critical about the Rogue One, but this is where I hear from Kathleen Kennedy, is because she got involved and there were a lot of reshoots. This movie, I remember, at least, I don't know how many people, if you're listening to this and you ever watched anything or heard anything before Rogue One ever came out, I was under the impression this was a story about people getting Death Star plans, which it was, but being hunted, and the main antagonist of it was Darth Vader. And that was not the case. And it
Based
wasn't
on the trailers, you're saying?
Based on what I was hearing theories about before the movie ever came out, too, not even just the trailers.
Okay.
That it was Darth Vader hunting people who had the Death Star plans leading into A New Hope, which is where we see him at the beginning of New Hope, right? And they only did that one scene at the end of it, and that was also a reshoot scene that they added with that whole Vader thing, which was spectacular. Yeah. I think, holy shit, that closed
such a good move.
That closed the film out right, and it's probably unreal to watch him do what he's doing that at the end of hunting and killing those rebel soldiers. But I know. I still think it's a great movie for what we got. That would have been cool, though, to have Vader as like the hunter on their tail. That's a pretty crazy character to have after you.
Oh, yeah.
And plus, who doesn't like more Vader on screen like that? So that was okay. I mean, I think at the time it was okay for what it came out. And again, unfortunately, Carrie Fisher had passed away at that exact time line in December, November-ish of 2016, so it was tough for people to experience that.
Actually, in terms of what to do about Carrie Fisher passing away, I honestly would not have been opposed to recasting her, frankly. If she was really integral to the next film. I mean, what?
That's really difficult to do, though, for recasting her. You mean to recast for a new Princess Leia?
No, I mean, if they wanted to do something actually coherent with her character, not something creepy where they're just, saying lines around her, I wouldn't have been opposed to having that role recast. I think you could find someone
I'm not disputing that, but I think
looks like that.
I think a character and an actress like Carrie Fisher for that role, I don't think you can recast it. It's like, unless it's like Rose, maybe. But you can't do Carrie Fisher like that.
I'm not saying I don't respect Carrie Fisher or anything, but I'm never opposed to recasting personally if someone dies.
I'm not,
and if
I think if they recast it, though, it would have thrown things out of, it just would have been another thing to throw shade at them. And I think if anything, they should have just had finished it off with.
I'm just saying, if you didn't decide to kill her in The Last Jedi, I would have rather them recast her than do what they did.
Yeah, fair enough. That's what you're saying. You said instead of us seeing what they just used the old footage from previous movies,
I would have actually have her, do something significant and have, dialogue that makes sense.
There was rumor, though, that to start Rise of Skywalker, there was supposed to be a funeral service for her, that she had passed away. They were going to start the film off like that. And then people thought that would just not be the greatest way to start off the movie.
It would have if they left her dead in Last Jedi.
Yeah, that's true. Well, actually, no, because then Rise of Skywalker would also have to take place an hour later. Like The Last Jedi took place an hour after The Force Awakens.
Well, I wouldn't say an hour, but a day or two.
A day or two, but still not that long.
Yeah, no dispute. I think when you look at the fundamentals of what they were trying to do, I don't know. I don't know what the discussion was. I don't know where they were in production for.
Oh my god! There's another thing that I missed. I didn't realize that Leia had died. That's another part I blinked at. I mean, I forgot that.
Well, it happens right at the end of the movie. You're kind of absorbing the fact that they beat Palpatine, and then obviously we talked earlier tonight about the fact that there was that. The intimate moment between Kylo and Rey.
Oh yeah, again, why should I care that they killed Palpatine at this point? I already know he can come back. Well, who's to say he won't come back again?
Well, you never know. I think then, if that's the case, then so you have your order of the films, I have my order, David has your order. Was there anything else you guys were still uneasy that wanted to talk about?
Why does Rey learn Force healing out of Jedi text when Anakin was frustrating himself literally into the dark side, not being able to have to learn that skill when he had a whole Jedi temple of knowledge to teach him?
Because she's a Palpatine, David.
Fuck.
Well, I mean, that means Palpatine had the ability this whole time.
Yes.
Why didn't he force heal Anakin new limbs then?
Yeah, because he'd be a more effective warrior if he were organic.
I'm BSing you guys.
I know.
Of course.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. But yeah, no, that's my main gripe. But yeah, we're at this point we're just beating a dead horse, coming up with new problems that we've already had for it.
Which is why I appreciate 1, 2, and 3 more, because they're not showing new Force abilities we've never seen before.
No doubt.
In this 7, 8, 9, there's new Force abilities that we're not seeing. It's like...
Well, I mean, I'm not opposed to new abilities if you, like, bother to explain them in depth and, go into detail about why they make sense with other things that happened in the past. I'm not opposed to new things like that.
There was actually only one new Force ability that we only see in the beginning of Phantom Menace, and it's actually hard to remember it because it was such a small little frame, like a few frames. But Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan actually used Force speed, and they sped down the hallway in that first Federation ship during the trap.
Well, then at the same time...
And that's something that would have been such a versatile skill for other Jedi to be using in the other movies, but they never touched it again.
You could use Force speed. I remember in Jedi Outcast, you could use Force speed as an ability. I remember that, yeah.
But they never used it in the rest of the movies, and that disappointed me a little bit because I'm a fan of super speed.
Also, that makes me have to question, why didn't Obi-Wan use Force speed to get through those laser doors?
No.
Which
he
Force
could
speed
have.
laser doors?
Like when they were having the Duel of Fates with Darth Maul and how he was getting stuck behind those laser doors. If he had used Force speed, he could have made it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I guess maybe it depends on timing. If when of the things closed on, you got to kind of take your chance. Then again, who knows? I mean, it's a possibility. It doesn't... as much as I can nitpick at that, it doesn't arc the entire... It doesn't throw a wrench in the entire story.
I've never found the original trilogy better than the prequels in many regards. I mean, I've always looked at... This is how I've always looked at Star Wars, personally. Actually, I think Snoke described it best.
Oh, boy.
I see raw, untamed power... And beyond that, something truly special. Like I said, I don't know. I think they do a lot of amazing things in the films, but, I mean, there are problems here and there, things I would have changed. Like I said, KOTOR 2 is my favorite thing to ever come out of Star Wars.
Fair enough. So then, gentlemen, final verdicts of this trilogy.
Can't be canon. It just can't be canon. It's too inconsistent.
That's yours?
Yep.
Tommy?
I agree with him there, but at the same time, it is captivating how disconnected these films are. Like the things that were going on in the minds of the creators when they came up with these things. I'm just wondering to myself, how did this happen? How did you mess up this royally? It is a truly captivating mess.
So, you're calling it a captivating mess, you're calling it non-canon.
I'm also calling it non-canon.
Well, but I'm just saying in terms of a unique phrase that everyone's using.
Very well. A captivating mess, I would say.
Okay, captivating mess, non-canon.
Too inconsistent to be canon.
That's fine.
I don't disagree with anything he just said.
Well, no, I'm here to also say I'm not going to disagree with you guys. I don't want to completely shit on it because it's Star Wars and it's close to my heart, but at the same time, if I really had to be completely non-emotional about it, but also still have to show some heart towards it, and when I left the theater in 2015, I'll say what I said then. It wasn't supposed to be like this. It doesn't feel like it was supposed to be like this.
No.
I mean, some parts felt like lack of originality, and then other points felt like Disney, which I've criticized Disney in my past when it comes to this particular franchise and not others, but it seems like when Disney buys you, they strip down anything that made you for them to buy you, and then they make something new out of you. If I owned a pie shop and it was the greatest pies on the planet, Disney would buy me out and then probably fill the jelly inside the pies with something else because they didn't want to have to pander the fact that I was the original guy who came up with it now that they own it. And I think that's what it was for Star Wars. They only made canon what was the movies of 1 through 6 and nothing else. I.e., some people, like I've heard, didn't think Kathleen Kennedy and JJ were too lazy to want to go through the expanded universe to maybe go through an encyclopedia of different stories they could build a new trilogy around.
In hindsight, that seems likely.
And they also just didn't want to give credit to other people who've come and built a whole Star Wars universe surrounding the lore of Star Wars outside of George Lucas. So that's why I give, my final verdict. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Congratulations, though, to Lucasfilms and them for at least, giving breakout performances like Adam Driver, Daisy Ridley, John Boyega. Obviously, Oscar
Props
Isaac.
to these actors, yes, indeed.
Oscar Isaac has been a great actor even before being cast as Poe in the series. I like Laura Dern, even though a lot of people hated her character in Last Jedi, and I understand why. I don't blame, because her character is kind of frustrating to side with, but until you finally see everything that happens. Fortunately, we didn't get to see Carrie Fisher finish this through physically, but we know she's in a better place. It was great to see Harrison Ford.
Better place in those films, yes.
It was great to see Harrison Ford for the The Force Awakens, and it was great to finally see Luke Skywalker, who was one of my favorite characters growing up as a kid. Unfortunately, I didn't like that he was only teased for me for 30 seconds in The Force Awakens, so that's what really felt like a kick in the gut. And then to see him in Last Jedi, I was happy to watch it because I got to see more Mark Hamill on screen, so that's why I didn't hate the film as much as most people did.
I suppose.
And understand it. And then The Rise of Skywalker, I just liked that I saw everyone together as much as it was very, very rushed because of everything that happened in the previous two films. But I don't know, sometimes I like conclusion films, and if they can do it okay enough as much as it is, sometimes I like to try to suspend my reality. No, I don't believe they should be canon. Yes, they were an unbinding mess.
A captivating mess.
A captivating, catastrophic, unbinding mess. But people will argue against that. They made a lot of money. Each of them made $1 billion now. A lot of that goes to budget. A lot of that also goes to $2 million, or actually $200 million on each of those three films goes to promotional things and TV buys for commercials and whatnot and everything else. So we don't know how much profit they're making on top of how much they're having to give out for the industry.
It's still exorbitant, and every actor connected is set for life from it. But they will continue working.
Unfortunately, John Boyega, though, John Boyega, I'm going to always hate myself for not remembering her name.
Kelly Marie Tran.
Thank you for doing that. They don't deserve to be harassed. Neither does Daisy Ridley.
No, not at
all. It's not them. They're actors doing a job. Obviously, they probably had a great time, and it would have probably been unreal fun, like unimaginable fun to do these films, to be a part of them.
No doubt.
Everyone who's doing these movies are making them are fans at the end of the day, and I think that's what it is. Though these felt like fan-made films that had enough money to hire, Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, even bring back Billy D. Williams as Lando.
I really hope
that was so cool, though. Okay, there we go. That's what I like. They brought back Lando, even though they should have brought him back in Force Awakens.
Yeah, it just felt like, and that's why, again, we can go in circles arguing this, but I want everyone to understand we appreciate art, and especially at AEF here, we always appreciate art as much as we hope that you guys do too. It's to discuss because we're passionate about these things. We're not here to hate for the sake of hating. You can't be a hater if you're so invested in the product and you're so invested in what the content is. If we were just to go, yeah, it sucked, it was stupid, and then not really talk about why it sucked and how much we know from past movies and other content that we've watched to make it a reason for defending our arguments, then yeah, we're haters. But we can't. We're just passionate fans that felt like certain things didn't need to happen. And if Disney wanted to wait a little bit after buying this series to really plan out a proper storyline of doing 7, 8, 9, that's fine. I at one point was like, shit, I don't want to wait 3 years in between a Star Wars movie as opposed to 2. But now I'm thinking maybe they should have waited an extra year, maybe to really fix what they were filming and then go back again and do some reshoots and appropriately fix it, because honestly 2 years in between releases, sometimes, it's 2 years, but it's not a lot of time. These movies take a handful of months to film, plus the post-production also takes a substantial amount of time to do, and then you do a copy that you screen before you have to make a decision if you need to go and make adjustments, i.e. bringing the actors back to do reshoots, which evidently these movies do. I feel that going forward there is optimism still. as much as people aren't going to like Disney's creative choices, there's still optimism with the Mandalorian series. Hearing rumors that the Obi-Wan series is on a back burner right now because they're making adjustments to the scripts. Some people might notice that it might be Kathleen Kennedy's fault. I'll try to give her the benefit of the doubt, but goddamn, right now our track record in recent years isn't the greatest, so we can only hope for the better. Other stuff going forward, I know there was rumor that Rian Johnson's trilogy is still happening, but might not still be happening, but he doesn't know if it's happening, and honestly, I don't know. I'm actually more encouraged for him to do one because it's just one guy doing a whole movie series as opposed to multiple people coming in and out of this revolving door.
So long as he separates it from the original 6 canon and he makes it his own timeline of his own events, separate, as in another KOTOR or something like that, then it's fine.
I think that's fine too.
What Disney should have done, but hey, it's what it is. It is what it is.
Yes, it is what it is, unfortunately. I think, as a fan, we have the right to say what is canon, what isn't canon. Some people were doing this back in the day, in the end of the 90s, early 2000s with the prequels. I wasn't, because I still trusted George Lucas's choices with his own content that he created. If it weren't for him, we wouldn't have this, so we have to always thank him. And I never took him as a jerk. He's not the same as other people who've taken lashes at the fans for, outcries. He honestly took a lot of heat, and, he didn't fight back, and you have to respect him because he did go through a lot. So we are where we are now. At the end of the day, we're still all Star Wars fans. That's the important thing, that we have to come back from this. We're all still Star Wars fans, we're going to be upset with it, but we want the best for these series. We want the best for anything that we're passionate about. I'm nervous for the Amazon Prime of Lord of the Rings prequel stuff because I hope it doesn't, do anything that, maybe injustifies what New Line Cinema did for it. But, I'm excited because I love the world of Middle-earth, and I do like to see other people take a chance to make stories out of it. It's a luscious world full of multiple, opportunities of stories and content the same way Star Wars is. And, we just have to be supportive in the way that we feel is necessary. That's not harassing people. It's also not lying blatantly on social media to try to be a social justice warrior or white knight, quote unquote, and you know who you are out there. There's no reason for that. Come on. Listen, things were clearly not well with this trilogy, unfortunately. You could see it when watching the movies. If I didn't see any online reaction, if I didn't talk to anyone, you can clearly see from 7, 8, and 9 it's like someone took over the steering wheel and decided to go on a different road for a moment and then steer back over a dirt patch to try to get back on the same road again. But then that road became potholey as well. It's just, that's the best way I can describe it.
If I could cap this off with a visual, imagine George Lucas, okay? And imagine a thought bubble above his head, which is the entire original 6 trilogy of Star Wars, okay? And now put the Star Wars title, logo, above that thought bubble. Now sever George Lucas's head, okay? It rolls off his body is still standing, and now slap on a Mickey Mouse robot head. And then now that robot head is generating a separate thought bubble, but still under the Star Wars logo. That is what we experienced.
Yeah, in some way, shape, or form. The more I discuss about this, it's like I wanted to really dig into Disney more, because I thought, they were the ones who might have been doing things to trigger people who, or some way, shape, or form. But I think, I don't know, I honestly want to think maybe it might have even been Kathleen Kennedy herself who had her own agendas, which surprises me because she had spent so much time with George Lucas when he was doing 1, 2, and 3. She'd been around him for so many years. That's why she was entrusted with Lucasfilm. So to see what happened, it's almost like, I don't know, you can't help but think like was she angry at George and she wanted to do her own story out of the sake for herself? But that's neither here nor there. These are only up to speculations. I don't have any direct source of material to prove that theory. So that is why it's just my own theory at the moment, but I don't believe it. I don't want to believe it because I think it's too malicious, and I don't want to put that evil on her. I don't think she deserves it because I never met her. I just only see what I watch and react to. And yeah, if there's anyone else who wants to say anything between the two of you guys before I close it out, forever hold your peace.
I'm good. Just thank you for having me.
Oh no, thank you for being on here, Tommaso.
Well, one more thing I'd like to extrapolate on, expand on, is, a politically correct plot is not necessarily a bad thing.
Right.
It's when you put political correctness ahead of telling a good story. I mean, an example of a great story that is extremely politically correct is Red Dead Redemption 2, and that's how I will end it.
Okay. That's well put.
And I don't think you should ever bash something simply because it is politically correct, which is something I have noticed people have been starting to do, especially since these films.
I don't disagree with that statement. And the last little bit I'll give on that statement to react to before I close it out here for us is I have been one of those people in the sense that I thought people or companies or movie series or films or any type of people on social media and so on and so forth will do it, and we've been saying it tonight, as a cheap plug.
Right.
I almost think they try to exploit it to their own personal gains, as opposed to actually trying to do it for the greater good of people who are going through issues in life that they want to see representation on film, TV, music, or just in day-to-day life of some sort. That's why that White Knight is in quote air quotes, because they're just doing it for their own cheap plugs and their own exploitative, just trying to exploit the situation to their own good. Some people will post things on social media just to get likes.
Oh yes.
And reactions. I know a lot of people who are, I'm not even going to bring that one up because I think it just doesn't tie into our story too much. But I mean the political correctness. At times it was present in these movies. It didn't completely overdo the story. It didn't ruin the story in any such way. They were just, you notice them at certain points. And it is what it is. It's not like, do or die.
All I'm saying is don't hate something simply because it is politically correct.
No.
Because it's something that I've noticed a lot of people start to do. They'll, take something that is great, and then they'll notice, this is extremely politically correct, and they'll think it's inherently bad because of that.
Right.
Don't think that's why
No.
anybody hates these films. They hate these films because they're not the greatest of qualities.
No.
They put political correctness in priority over story quality, and that is why we don't like it.
I think because again, people are a little bit more aware of what's going on. We're a little bit more. I don't want to say people back in the day were stupid, but people allowed their reality to be suspended much easier than we are now doing it nowadays when we watch movies and TV. We react faster because we've experienced more, and there's a lot more content to experience that faster in terms of just day-to-day life, whatever we're interested in. And yeah, I don't have any issue with political correctness and in those things being put into movies if they
serve the plot.
Yes, they serve the plot with proper purpose, and it's not just there to be there.
But if it's a priority of political correctness over storytelling, and it's literally just shooed in and just forced upon us, it's pander.
Right,
yes.
it's pander.
Just pander.
It's pander in the main last part of this whole thing. You lose your identity.
Yes.
And that's something you can't have happen. You don't want to lose your identity. You want to keep the master story, keep your identity, and if you want to bring in other elements of the more common world as it is nowadays in 2020, so be it. That's nothing wrong with that.
Just make a separate story.
Yeah,
If you're going to do that.
that's fine.
Yeah. You can't connect it to stories that have already been told based on different topical, topical elements that, that was going on back in the 70s when the original trilogy was made, and then back in the 90s when the prequel trilogy was made.
Exactly.
I'm sure they reference different, aspects of topical news back in those time periods. But if you're going to do that, especially when you have a different lore master now, it has to be a separate story.
Right. But I think for that being said, we still love this franchise. We want the best for this franchise. We're still optimistic for what's to come with other content being produced by LucasArts under Disney and multiple projects. We can only hope for the best. I want to thank my guest, though, David Mortimore, for coming on tonight.
Thank you.
Tommy Amoroso. Both you guys were great, and thank you so much for your time. But this was a long show. I'm glad for everyone who stuck around to listen to this. It was a fun time to talk about this and just really expand and pick people's brains about in different depths of this universe, because there's still a lot, and there's still a handful of things we could still talk about.
It was informative, yes.
So yeah, you guys are always welcome to come back. Friends of AEF as always. Thank you guys so much. And this is Rob Star. I want to thank all of you who listened today. Thank you so much for your time. Please give us a like and subscribe, and share with us if you guys have any of the same thoughts and feelings towards Star Wars. Anything we brought up today, please feel free to share with us. We always like to hear open discussions. I think it's really important, we talk about these things because we want to celebrate these movies, but we also want to discuss maybe what could have been and what shouldn't have been. And if there was some stuff that you guys like that we didn't talk about, please bring it up. We'd love to share, the passion with you. So thank you guys so very much, and we'll hope to see you another time soon. Rob Star out.